A 5-year-old girl is bleeding in a closet while the man who broke her arm sleeps drunk in the next room. Her trembling fingers dial the only number written on a crumpled napkin hidden in her shoe. The phone rings once, twice. Then a voice like gravel and gasoline answers. Yeah. She whispers 4 words that will tear through Montana like a bullet. He broke my arm. The man on the other end is Ethan Graves, known in every backroad bar and midnight highway as Iron, a scarred biker with a kill count no one speaks about, and a past so violent even his brothers fear what he's capable of. Tonight, that violence is about to become someone's salvation. If you're watching this from anywhere in the world, Chicago, Texas, London, wherever you are right now, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. You need to see how this ends. The Harley's engine cut through the frozen Montana night like a chainsaw through bone. Ethan Graves didn't ride motorcycles the way other men did, smooth, controlled, respectful of the machine. He rode like he was trying to outrun something that lived inside his chest, something with teeth and claws that never stopped chewing. The speedometer climbed past 90 on a 2-lane highway slick with black ice. Snow fell sideways in the high beams, white streaks against infinite darkness. His breath came out in clouds inside the helmet, fogging the visor. He ripped it off and let the cold tear into his face like punishment. Lily's voice still echoed in his skull, small, broken, terrified. He broke my arm. 4 words. That's all it took to pull Ethan out of a bar in Whitefish, where he'd been 3 whiskeys deep into forgetting his own name. 4 words to make him throw cash on the counter, kick his bike to life, and tear south toward Kalispell without a jacket, without gloves, without anything except rage and the knowledge that a child was waiting for him in the dark. The phone call had come 23 minutes ago. Every second since then felt like drowning. Ethan didn't know how Lily got his number. He'd only met her twice. Once at a diner when her mother Sarah brought her in during the morning shift, and once outside a grocery store when Sarah's car wouldn't start, and Ethan happened to be walking past. Both times, Lily had stared at him with those huge gray eyes, like she was memorizing his face in case she ever needed to find him again. Kids usually looked at Ethan and moved closer to their parents. Lily had looked at him and smiled. Now she was hiding in a closet with a broken arm, while Kevin Price, Sarah's boyfriend, a middle management nobody with a truck lease and a cocaine habit, slept off whatever he'd been drinking. Ethan's gloved hands tightened on the handlebars until the leather creaked. The house was small, 1 story, paint peeling off the siding like dead skin. A single yellow porch light burned above the front door. Kevin's truck sat in the driveway, snow piling on the hood. No other cars. No neighbors close enough to hear anything. The kind of place where bad things happened in silence. Ethan killed the engine 2 houses down and walked the rest of the way. His boots crunched through snow that hadn't been shoveled in weeks. The cold bit through his thin t-shirt and road-worn jeans, but he barely felt it. Adrenaline and fury kept him warm. He tried the front door. Locked. He moved to the side window. Locked. Around back he found a sliding glass door with a broken latch that gave way with 1 hard shove. The house smelled like stale beer, cigarette smoke, and something sour that made Ethan's stomach turn. Dirty dishes piled in the sink. Empty bottles lined the counter. A man's jacket hung on a chair, the pockets bulging with pill bottles. Ethan moved through the kitchen without making a sound. Years of breaking into places he wasn't supposed to be had taught him how to walk like a ghost. Down the hallway, a door stood half open. Inside, Kevin Price snored on a bed that hadn't been made in days. Shirtless, 1 arm thrown over his face, mouth open. A tattoo of a cross stretched across his chest. Ironic, considering what Ethan was about to do to him. But Lily's voice stopped him cold. "Ethan?" It came from the closet at the end of the hall, barely a whisper. He moved past Kevin's room and knelt in front of the closet door, pressing his palm flat against the wood. "Lily, it's me. You safe to open this?" A small rustling sound. The door cracked open an inch, and 1 gray eye peered out at him through the darkness. Then the door opened wider, and Ethan saw her. Bruises covered the left side of her face. Her arm hung at an unnatural angle, cradled against her chest. She wore pajamas with cartoon stars on them, now smudged with dirt and tears. When she saw Ethan, her entire body started shaking. "He said if I told anyone he'd hurt Mommy," she whispered. Ethan's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He reached into the closet and lifted Lily into his arms as carefully as he would handle dynamite. She weighed almost nothing, her head pressed against his shoulder, and he felt her tears soak through his shirt. "Where's your mom?" he asked quietly. "Work. Night shift." Sarah worked doubles at the truck stop diner, pouring coffee for drivers who tipped in coins and kept their hands to themselves only because she smiled while carrying a pot of boiling liquid. She worked herself to exhaustion trying to keep Lily fed, and this was what happened while she was gone. Ethan carried Lily through the house, past Kevin's room, where the man still snored like he didn't have a care in the world. Every instinct Ethan had screamed at him to stop, to put Lily down, to walk back into that bedroom and make sure Kevin Price never woke up again. But Lily's fingers clutched his shirt, and her breath hitched against his neck, and Ethan kept walking. He put her in the sidecar of his bike, a ridiculous addition he'd welded on last summer for hauling cargo and never thought he'd use for a child. She fit perfectly, curled into a ball with his leather jacket draped over her like a blanket. The engine roared to life, and Ethan pointed the bike toward Kalispell Regional Medical Center. The ER was bright and sterile and too goddamn slow. A nurse took one look at Lily's arm and disappeared to find a doctor. Ethan stood against the wall with his arms crossed, dried blood on his knuckles from a bar fight 3 days ago that he'd already forgotten. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A television in the corner played the news with the sound off. A doctor finally appeared, young, tired, with the kind of face that said he'd seen too much human cruelty to be shocked by anything anymore. He examined Lily's arm, asked her gentle questions she answered in whispers, and then looked up at Ethan. "Who are you?" "A friend." "Where's her mother?" "Working." "And her father?" Ethan's expression didn't change. "Not in the picture." The doctor's gaze moved to Lily, then back to Ethan. "This wasn't an accident." "No shit." "I'm required by law to report this." "Good," Ethan said. "Do it." The doctor studied him for a long moment, then nodded and disappeared again. Ethan heard him talking to someone on a phone, his voice low and urgent. Cops would be here soon, social services. Maybe even Kevin himself if someone tipped him off. Ethan pulled out his phone and sent a text to Danny Cole, his oldest brother in arms. "At Kalispell Regional. Need backup. Bring the crew." The response came back in under 10 seconds. "On the way." Ethan slid the phone back into his pocket and returned his attention to Lily. She sat on the examination table with her legs dangling, her broken arm now wrapped in a temporary splint. A nurse had given her a stuffed bear that she clutched with her good hand. "Are you going to leave?" Lily asked. "No." "Promise?" Ethan crossed the room and knelt in front of her so they were eye to eye. "I'm not going anywhere." "Kevin said bikers are bad people." "Kevin's right," Ethan said. "But sometimes bad people are the only ones who show up." Lily tilted her head, considering this. "You're not bad." Ethan didn't answer. He'd done things that would give this kid nightmares for the rest of her life if she ever found out. He'd beaten men bloody for disrespecting his club. He'd moved illegal cargo across state lines. He'd spent 2 years in county lockup for assault with a deadly weapon. A pool cue, in that case, which the judge apparently considered deadly enough. But sitting here in this sterile ER with a 5-year-old girl who'd called him because she had no one else? Maybe he wasn't completely bad. Or maybe he was just bad in a useful direction tonight. The sound of boots echoed down the hallway before Danny appeared, followed by 3 other members of the Iron Wolves MC. Danny was older than Ethan by 15 years, gray streaking through his beard, eyes that had seen every kind of darkness and still managed to find reasons to laugh. The others, Garrett, Luis, and Hound, were younger, harder, the kind of men who looked like they'd been carved from violence and bad decisions. They filled the waiting room like a storm rolling in. Leather vests with patches that announced their club affiliation, chains hanging from belt loops, tattoos covering arms and necks. The nurse at the desk looked up, eyes widening, and reached for the phone. Danny held up both hands. "We're just here to support a friend." "This is a hospital, and we'll be quiet as church mice," Danny said, flashing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Promise." They settled into chairs that were too small for their frames, boots planted wide, arms crossed. The message was clear. No one was getting to Lily or Ethan without going through them first. A cop arrived 30 minutes later, young, fresh-faced, probably 2 years out of the academy. He took one look at the bikers in the waiting room, and his hand drifted toward his sidearm. "We got a report about a child with suspicious injuries," the cop said. Ethan stepped forward. "That'd be me who brought her in." The cop's eyes narrowed. "You're not the father." "No." "Mother's boyfriend?" "Hell no." "Then what's your relationship to the child?" Ethan glanced at Lily, who watched him from the examination room through the glass partition. "I'm the guy who answered the phone when she needed help." The cop pulled out a notebook. "I'm going to need a full statement." So Ethan told him. The phone call. The broken arm. Kevin Price passed out drunk while a 5-year-old girl bled in a closet. He gave the cop the address, described the house, mentioned the broken sliding door. He didn't mention the part where he'd stood outside Kevin's bedroom and considered homicide. The cop wrote everything down with mechanical efficiency, his expression carefully neutral. When Ethan finished, the cop looked up and said, "Kevin Price's uncle is Sheriff Dale Price." Silence fell over the waiting room like a blanket. Danny was the first to speak. "Well, shit." The young cop shifted his weight. "Look, I'm going to file this report. But you should know, accusations against Kevin tend to disappear." "Disappear," Ethan repeated slowly. "I'm just saying, if you're expecting this to go anywhere, you might want to prepare for disappointment." Garrett stood up from his chair, 6'4" of barely controlled rage. "So we're just supposed to let him keep breaking kids?" The cop's hand moved back toward his gun. "I'm doing my job." "Your job is to protect people," Louise said from his corner, "not protect rich men's nephews." "I'm filing the report," the cop said again, more firmly this time. "That's all I can do." He left before anyone could respond. The sound of his footsteps faded down the hallway, and then it was just the bikers, the nurses pretending not to stare, and Lily sitting alone in the examination room with her broken arm and her stuffed bear. Danny moved to stand beside Ethan. "You thinking what I'm thinking? If you're thinking about paying Kevin a visit, yeah." "That's exactly what they'll expect," Danny said quietly. "Sheriff's probably already got someone watching his house. Minute you show up, they'll arrest you for trespassing, assault, whatever they can make stick. And then who protects the kid?" Ethan's fists clenched. "So we do nothing?" "I didn't say that." Danny pulled out his phone and scrolled through contacts. "I know someone, attorney out of Missoula, Margaret Hayes. She built her career taking down men who think badges and family names make them untouchable." "We can't afford an attorney." "She doesn't work for money," Danny said. "She works for blood." Sarah arrived at the hospital just before midnight, still wearing her diner uniform and smelling like fryer grease. Her face was pale, eyes red from crying, hands shaking as she ran toward the examination room where Lily was getting her arm set in a proper cast. Ethan stood in the hallway and watched through the glass as Sarah wrapped her daughter in a hug that looked like it might break them both. Lily's face pressed into her mother's shoulder. Sarah's mouth moved in words Ethan couldn't hear, apologies probably, promises. All the things parents say when they realize they failed to keep their child safe. Danny appeared beside him with 2 cups of vending machine coffee. "She gonna be okay?" "Which one?" "Both." Ethan took the coffee and didn't drink it. "Kevin's still out there." "Not for long." Danny nodded toward the parking lot. "Margaret's driving up tonight, should be here by morning." "What's she gonna do that the cops won't?" "Find the other victims." Danny's voice was quiet, steady. Men like Kevin don't start with broken arms. There's always a pattern, always other people he's hurt. Margaret will dig until she finds them, and then she'll bury him so deep he'll never see daylight again. Ethan wanted to believe that. He wanted to believe in lawyers and legal systems and justice that came in courtrooms instead of back alleys. But he'd seen too much of the world to have faith in anything except violence. Sarah emerged from the examination room with Lily in her arms. The little girl's arm was now encased in bright purple fiberglass. She'd chosen the color herself, the nurse said, because it reminded her of wildflowers. "I don't know how to thank you," Sarah said to Ethan, her voice breaking. Don't. Ethan's tone was flat. Just tell me where he is. Sarah's face crumpled. Ethan, please. Where is he? At the house. Or his brother's place. I don't... She trailed off, looking down at Lily. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was hurting her. She never said anything. She never... Kids don't, Danny interrupted gently. They think it's their fault. They think no one will believe them. They keep secrets because monsters are good at making them feel like they have to. Sarah's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Lily reached up with her good hand and wiped tears from her mother's face. It's okay, Mommy. Ethan saved me. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. Saved her. As if rescuing one kid from one night of horror made up for all the other nights, all the other kids he'd ignored, all the times he'd walked past suffering because it wasn't his problem. You're both coming with us, Danny said. Kevin doesn't know where we live, and by the time he figures it out, we'll have Margaret working the case. Sarah looked at Ethan. Is that safe? Safer than going home, Ethan said. I can't just leave. I have work. Lily has school. Kevin broke your daughter's arm, Garrett said from across the room, his voice low and dangerous. You think he's done? You think he's going to wake up tomorrow and decide to be a better man? He'll come back. They always come back. Sarah's face went white. She looked down at Lily, at the purple cast, at the bruises already turning yellow around the edges. Then she looked back at Ethan. Okay. The Iron Wolves clubhouse sat at the end of a dirt road 30 miles outside Kalispell, surrounded by pine trees and barbed wire fence. It used to be a hunting lodge before Danny bought it cash from a widow who didn't ask questions. Now it was half motorcycle repair shop, half fortress, all home to men who didn't fit anywhere else. Ethan led Sarah and Lily inside while the others spread out to secure the perimeter. The main room smelled like motor oil, cigarettes, and coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. A wood stove burned in the corner, throwing shadows across walls covered in club memorabilia, photographs, old patches, a framed newspaper article about a charity ride that ended in a bar fight. It's not much, Ethan said. It's perfect, Lily whispered, staring around with wide eyes. Sarah set her down carefully on a couch that had seen better decades. Lily curled up with her stuffed bear, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Sarah pulled a blanket over her daughter and sat on the edge of the cushion, one hand resting on Lily's back like she needed to keep touching her to make sure she was real. Danny came in with sandwiches and juice boxes he'd picked up from a gas station. Not exactly gourmet, but it's food. Sarah tried to smile. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Danny said. The hard part's just starting. He was right. Ethan could feel it in his bones, that familiar tension before a fight, the calm before someone threw the first punch. Kevin Price wasn't going to let this go. Men like him never did. They felt entitled to their violence, protected by family connections and a legal system that bent over backward to give them second chances. But Kevin hadn't met the Iron Wolves yet, hadn't learned what happened when you touch something they decided to protect. Ethan stepped outside for a cigarette, letting the cold air burn his lungs. The sky was clear now, stars scattered across the darkness like broken glass. He could hear the others talking in low voices, making plans, checking weapons they'd never admit to owning. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Yeah. This is Margaret Hayes. The voice was sharp, professional, no nonsense. Danny Cole tells me you've got a situation. That's one word for it. I'm 3 hours out. Don't do anything stupid before I get there. Define stupid. Anything that ends with you in jail or him in a grave. A pause. I know men like you, Mr. Graves. You think violence is the answer because it's the only language you speak fluently. But I promise you, what I can do to Kevin Price in a courtroom will hurt him worse than anything you could do in an alley. Ethan took a long drag from his cigarette. He broke a 5-year-old's arm. And I'm going to make sure he never touches another child again. Margaret's voice softened slightly. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Ethan looked back at the clubhouse, at the warm light spilling through the windows, at the shadow of Sarah sitting beside her sleeping daughter. I don't trust easy. Good. Neither do I. Another pause. See you in 3 hours. She hung up. Ethan crushed the cigarette under his boot and went back inside. The night stretched on. Danny made more coffee. Garrett and Louise took first watch. Hound fell asleep in a chair with a shotgun across his lap. Sarah dozed fitfully beside Lily, jerking awake every 10 minutes like she expected someone to kick down the door. Ethan didn't sleep. He sat at the table with his phone face up, waiting for Kevin to call or text, or show up with his uncle's badge and a warrant. But the phone stayed silent. Around 4 in the morning, headlights cut through the darkness outside. Everyone was instantly alert, hands moving toward weapons. But it was just Margaret Hayes stepping out of a pristine black Mercedes that looked absurdly out of place in the dirt parking lot. She was 50, maybe 60, with steel gray hair pulled back in a bun and a face that could cut diamonds. She wore a business suit under a long wool coat and carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Ethan's motorcycle. Margaret Hayes walked into the clubhouse like she owned it, assessed the situation in 3 seconds, and pointed at Ethan. "You, coffee, now." Ethan poured her a cup. She took it black and didn't flinch, even though it tasted like battery acid. "Where's the child?" Ethan nodded toward the couch. Margaret crossed the room and knelt beside Lily, examining her face without touching her. Her expression remained neutral, but Ethan saw her jaw tighten. "And the mother?" "Right here." Sarah sat up, blinking away sleep. "Are you the lawyer?" "I am." Margaret pulled a chair over and sat down. "I need to ask you some difficult questions. Is that all right?" Sarah nodded. "How long have you been with Kevin Price?" 8 months. "Has he ever hurt you?" Sarah hesitated. Not like this." "Define not like this." "He pushed me once, grabbed my wrist too hard a few times, but I thought—" She looked down at her hands. "I thought I was overreacting." "You weren't." Margaret pulled a legal pad from her briefcase. "Has he ever threatened you?" "Yes." "With what?" "He said if I left him, he'd make sure I lost custody of Lily. His uncle's the sheriff. He said no one would believe me." Margaret wrote that down. "Has he ever hurt Lily before tonight?" Sarah's face crumpled. "I don't know. She never said. But now I'm wondering, there were bruises. On her legs, her back. She said she fell at school. I believed her." "It's not your fault," Margaret said firmly. "Abusers are very good at manipulation. They isolate their victims, make them doubt themselves, convince them that no one will help." She looked at Ethan. "That's why men like him don't expect someone like you to show up." Ethan leaned against the wall. "What's your plan?" "First, we get a restraining order. Second, we file charges, assault, child abuse, whatever sticks. Third, we dig into Kevin's past and find every other person he's hurt, because there are always others." Margaret closed her legal pad. "Fourth, we make sure Sarah and Lily are protected while this plays out." "That's where we come in," Danny said. Margaret glanced at the bikers filling the room, armed, dangerous, loyal to a fault. "I don't condone vigilante justice." "We're not vigilantes," Danny said. "We're just concerned citizens keeping an eye on our friend." "Right." Margaret stood. "I'll be in touch." In the meantime, no one contacts Kevin. No one goes near his property. No one does anything that could jeopardize this case. Understood? Everyone nodded except Ethan. Margaret fixed him with a look that could stop a freight train. "Especially you." "What makes you think I'm the problem?" "Because Danny told me about you. Because I can see it in your eyes. Because men like you think the world is made of nails and you're a hammer." She stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could smell her perfume, something expensive and cold. "Kevin Price wants you to hit him. He's probably already got his phone set to record the moment you show up. One punch and his uncle arrests you for assault. You'll spend the next 6 months in county while Kevin walks free. Is that what you want?" Ethan didn't answer. "I didn't think so." Margaret picked up her briefcase. "I'll file the paperwork first thing Monday morning. Until then, everyone stays here. No exceptions." She left in a swirl of wool and authority, the Mercedes disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Danny refilled his coffee. "I like her." "She's terrifying," Louise muttered. "Exactly," Danny said. Ethan walked outside again, needing air, needing space, needing something other than the walls closing in around him. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. Birds sang in the trees. The world kept turning like nothing had happened. But something had changed. Ethan could feel it in his chest, that unfamiliar weight pressing against his ribs. Responsibility. Purpose. The knowledge that a little girl was depending on him not to screw this up. His phone buzzed. This time, it was a number he recognized. Kevin Price. The text message was short and to the point. "You're a dead man." Ethan stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he showed it to Danny. "Forward that to Margaret," Danny said. "Threats in writing are evidence." "He wants me to come after him." "Of course he does. It's the only play he has left." Danny clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "But you're not going to give it to him." "You sure about that?" "No," Danny admitted. "But I'm hoping the part of you that saved that kid tonight is stronger than the part that wants to tear Kevin apart." Ethan looked back at the clubhouse, at the window where he could just barely see Lily's small form curled on the couch. She was safe here, protected. As long as he didn't do anything stupid, she'd stay that way. But Kevin Price was out there in the world, unpunished, untouched, probably already planning his next move. And every instinct Ethan had screamed at him to finish this the way he finished everything, with his fists and a lot of blood. He typed out a response to Kevin's text. "Come find me." Then he deleted it without sending and put the phone away. "Good choice," Danny said. Ethan wasn't so sure, but he turned his back on the sunrise and walked back inside to watch over a broken little girl who'd called him when she had no one else. And somewhere in the distance, Kevin Price was waking up to an empty house and a missing girlfriend, and a situation that was spiraling out of his control. The war hadn't started yet. But it was coming. The restraining order came through Monday afternoon. Margaret called Danny with the news, while Ethan stood outside the clubhouse, watching Lily try to pet a stray cat that kept running away. The little girl moved carefully, her purple cast held against her chest, whispering something Ethan couldn't hear. The cat eventually let her touch its head. Lily smiled like she'd won the lottery. "Judge signed it," Danny said, hanging up. "Kevin can't come within 500 feet of Sarah or Lily." Ethan lit a cigarette. "Paper doesn't stop bullets." "No, but it gives us legal ground to stand on when he violates it." Danny leaned against the porch railing. "Margaret's also filing charges. Assault, child endangerment, domestic battery. Says the DA's office is reviewing it." "The DA who plays golf with Sheriff Price every Sunday?" Danny's jaw tightened. "Yeah, that one." Inside the clubhouse, Sarah was on the phone with her manager at the diner, explaining why she couldn't come back to work yet. Her voice carried through the screen door, apologetic, desperate, trying to hold on to a job that paid $9 an hour, plus whatever tips lonely truckers felt generous enough to leave. Garrett emerged from the garage, wiping grease off his hands. Kevin's truck just drove past the access road, third time today. Ethan's head snapped up. "He stop?" "No, just slowed down, probably trying to figure out where the entrance is." "He finds it, we'll know," Luis called from the roof where he'd stationed himself with binoculars and a rifle he swore was just for hunting deer. Danny crushed his cigarette under his boot. "Ethan, I need you to not be here when Kevin shows up." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. The second he sees you, this turns into something Margaret can't fix." Danny's voice was calm but firm. "Take a ride. Clear your head. Let us handle security." Ethan stared at him. "You want me to run?" "I want you to be smart." Danny stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You've been standing out here for 3 days watching that little girl like you're waiting for someone to come take her. You haven't slept. You barely eat. And I know that look in your eyes, brother. I've seen it before. Right before you do something we all regret. I'm fine. You're a loaded gun." Danny put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "And Kevin's trying real hard to pull your trigger." Ethan shrugged off the hand. "So what? I just leave? Let him circle this place like a vulture?" "You leave so he doesn't get what he wants." Danny's expression hardened. "He wants you to break that restraining order. Wants you to throw the first punch. Wants to turn you into the bad guy so everyone forgets he's the one who broke a kid's arm." Lily's laughter cut through the tension. She'd managed to get the cat to sit in her lap, and now she was gently stroking its matted fur. Her face lit up with pure joy despite everything she'd been through. "She trusts you," Danny said quietly. "Don't prove her wrong." Ethan didn't respond. He walked to his bike, kicked it to life, and tore down the dirt road without looking back. The engine roared between his thighs, the wind tore at his face, and the speedometer climbed past 90 on a highway that twisted through mountains like a knife wound. He rode for 2 hours with no destination, just movement, just speed, just the mindless need to outrun the rage building in his chest. When he finally stopped, he was in some nameless town with a bar that opened at noon and didn't ask questions. The whiskey burned going down. Ethan ordered another. An old man at the end of the bar watched him with rheumy eyes. "You look like you're trying to drown something." "Mind your business." "Fair enough." The old man went back to his beer. Ethan's phone buzzed. Margaret Hayes. He answered. "Yeah." The DA declined to press charges. Her voice was clipped, professional, furious. Said there wasn't enough evidence. Ethan's hand tightened around his glass. "The kid's got a broken arm," which Kevin claims was an accident. Says Lily fell down the stairs. Says Sarah's making false accusations because she's bitter about their breakup. Margaret paused. "He's already got his story straight, and his uncle's backing him up." "So that's it? He just walks?" "For now." The sound of papers shuffling. "But I'm not done. I've got a private investigator digging into Kevin's past. 3 other women have come forward off the record, ex-girlfriends, who say he was violent. None of them filed charges because Sheriff Price convinced them it would ruin their lives." Ethan drained his whiskey. "How long?" "To build a case strong enough to stick? 6 months, maybe a year." "You think Sarah and Lily have a year?" Margaret was quiet for a moment. "I think they have as long as you and your friends keep them safe." She hung up. Ethan ordered another drink and stared at his reflection in the mirror behind the bar. Scarred face, cold eyes, leather vest with patches that marked him as property of the Iron Wolves MC. He looked exactly like what he was. A weapon someone had forgotten to disarm. His father's voice echoed in his head, rough with whiskey and disappointment. "You're good for one thing, boy, hurting people. Don't pretend you're anything else." Ethan had spent his whole life proving that voice right. He left cash on the bar and walked out into the afternoon sun. His bike sat in the parking lot like a faithful dog waiting for its master. He climbed on, started the engine, and realized he had nowhere to go except back to the clubhouse, where a 5-year-old girl was waiting for him to be something other than what he was. The ride back felt longer than the ride out. By the time Ethan pulled up to the clubhouse, the sun was setting and the temperature had dropped 20 degrees. Frost glittered on the windshields of the bikes lined up outside. Danny met him at the door. Kevin showed up. Ethan's entire body went rigid. "When?" 2 hours ago, parked at the end of the access road, got out of his truck, started yelling about how we kidnapped his girlfriend and her kid. Danny's expression was grim. Hound recorded the whole thing. Kevin violated the restraining order, made threats. The works. "Where is he now?" "Gone. We called the cops like Margaret told us to. Took them 90 minutes to show up, and by then Kevin was long gone." Danny stepped aside to let Ethan in. But that's not the worst part. Inside, Sarah sat on the couch with her face in her hands. Lily was nowhere in sight. "Where's the kid?" Ethan asked. "Sleeping in the back room," Danny said. But Sarah got a call from her landlord. Someone broke into her house, trashed the place, spray-painted threats on the walls. Ethan crossed to Sarah. "What did the threats say?" She looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "That I'm a lying whore. That I'll regret this. That—" Her voice broke. "That he's going to take Lily from me." Ethan's fists clenched hard enough that his knuckles cracked. "Did you call the cops?" "They said it's probably just vandalism. Said there's no proof Kevin did it." Sarah laughed bitterly. "His uncle's the sheriff. Of course there's no proof." Danny handed Ethan a beer he didn't want. "Margaret's filing a motion to have the restraining order enforced. Says if the local cops won't do their job, she'll get a federal judge involved." "How long will that take?" "Too long." Danny sat down heavily. "Look, we can keep Sarah and Lily here as long as they need, but we can't stop Kevin from circling, can't stop him from making threats, can't stop him from trying to provoke us into doing something stupid." Garrett appeared from the hallway, his face dark. We could just make him disappear. Everyone went silent. No, Danny said firmly. Why not? Garrett's voice rose. He's threatening a kid. He broke into Sarah's house. The cops aren't doing shit. So why are we sitting here like we've got our hands tied? Because that's exactly what he wants, Danny said. He wants us to cross that line so he can play victim. Who gives a damn what he wants? Garrett jabbed a finger toward the back room where Lily slept. That little girl called Ethan because she had no one else. And now we're supposed to just wait around while her abuser stalks her? That's not who we are. It's who we have to be, Danny said, his voice hard. For now. Garrett spat on the floor and stormed outside. The screen door slammed behind him. Louise stood up. I'll go talk to him. Don't bother, Danny muttered. He's right to be angry. Ethan drank his beer in 3 long pulls and crushed the can. I need air. He walked out back where the forest pressed close against the fence. The stars were coming out now, sharp and cold against the Montana sky. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The woods answered with silence. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Yeah. You think you're protecting her. Kevin's voice was slurred, drunk or high or both. But you're just making it worse. Ethan's jaw clenched. You violated the restraining order. Restraining order? Kevin laughed. That's a piece of paper. My uncle wiped his ass with it. You want to know what real power looks like, Iron? It looks like me standing outside your little hideout whenever I want. Looks like cops who do what I tell them. Looks like you watching your back for the rest of your pathetic life. You done? Not even close. Kevin's voice dropped lower. Sarah's mine. Lily's mine. And when I get them back, and I will, I'm going to make sure they remember what happens when you disrespect me. The line went dead. Ethan stood there in the darkness with his phone in his hand and murder in his heart. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to get on his bike, find Kevin, and end this the way it should have ended 4 days ago, with blood and broken bones and silence. But Lily's voice echoed in his memory. Ethan saved me. He forced himself to walk back inside. Danny took one look at his face and said, What happened? Kevin called. Made threats. Record it? No. Danny swore under his breath. We need to start documenting everything. Every call, every text, every time he drives past this place. He's not going to stop, Ethan said. I know. So what's the plan? We just sit here and wait for him to escalate? Danny rubbed his face. Margaret says, I don't give a damn what Margaret says. Ethan's voice was low and dangerous. That man just told me he's coming for them. You want me to sit on my hands while he makes good on that threat? I want you to trust the process. The process already failed. The DA declined charges. The cops won't enforce the restraining order. Kevin's uncle runs this whole county. Ethan stepped closer. So tell me, Danny, what exactly are we trusting? Danny met his eyes. Each other. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. We're all that kid's got, Danny continued. Not the cops, not the courts, us. And the second we start acting like the criminals everyone thinks we are, we lose the moral high ground. We lose Margaret's help. We lose any chance of putting Kevin away legally. He paused. And we lose Lily's trust. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to punch something, wanted to tear the world apart with his bare hands until it made sense again. Instead, he turned and walked to the back room where Lily slept. She was curled under a quilt. Someone's grandmother probably made 50 years ago, her purple cast resting on a pillow, her face peaceful in a way that made Ethan's chest hurt. The stuffed bear from the hospital sat on the nightstand, keeping watch. Sarah appeared in the doorway behind him. She asks about you when you're not here. Ethan didn't turn around. What does she say? She wants to know if you're coming back. Sarah's voice was soft. I told her you always come back. I hope I didn't lie. You didn't. Sarah moved to stand beside him, both of them watching the sleeping child. Kevin called me too, after he called you. He said if I don't come back to him, he'll make sure I never see Lily again. Said his uncle can have her taken away, put in foster care, claim I'm an unfit mother. He's lying. Is he? Sarah looked at Ethan with hollow eyes. I'm living in a biker clubhouse with my daughter. I lost my job. My house is destroyed. I have $17 in my bank account and no plan for tomorrow. She wiped her eyes. Maybe he's right. Maybe she'd be better off. Don't. Ethan's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Sarah's breath hitched. I'm so tired. I know. I don't know how to keep fighting. You don't have to. Ethan finally turned to look at her. That's what we're here for. Sarah studied his face, the scars, the hard angles, the eyes that had seen too much. Why are you doing this? You barely know us. Ethan didn't have an answer that made sense. He barely knew himself. But standing here in this room with a broken woman and a sleeping child, he felt something shift inside his chest. Not redemption. He didn't believe in that. But purpose, maybe. A reason to exist beyond his own anger. Because she called me, he said finally, and I answered. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat in the main room cleaning his Glock while the others took shifts on patrol. Around 3 a.m, Danny came in from outside with frost in his beard. You should sleep. Can't. Danny poured himself coffee from the pot that had been sitting there since dinner. You know what your problem is? I'm sure you're about to tell me. You think you don't deserve this? Danny gestured around the clubhouse. The brotherhood, the purpose, the chance to be something other than your father's son. Ethan's hands stilled on the gun. Don't. Someone needs to say it. Danny sat down across from him. You've spent your whole life trying to prove you're the monster he told you that you were. But that kid in there? She doesn't see a monster. She sees the man who showed up when no one else would. She doesn't know me. She knows enough. Danny leaned back. I ever tell you why I started the Iron Wolves? No. My old man used to beat me bloody. Every night, for years. Said he was teaching me to be tough. Said the world was full of predators and I needed to learn how to survive. Danny's voice was flat, emotionless. I survived. And when I turned 18, I put him in the hospital, broke his jaw, 3 ribs, and his right arm. Then I left and never went back. Ethan had known Danny for 10 years and never heard this story. I started the club because I wanted to find other guys like me, Danny continued. Guys who'd been hurt but refused to become what hurt them. Guys who understood violence but chose when to use it. Guys who could be dangerous and gentle at the same time. He met Ethan's eyes. That's who we are. That's who you are, even if you don't believe it yet. I'm not gentle. You carried a 5-year-old girl out of that house like she was made of glass. That's gentle. Ethan looked away. One good deed doesn't erase the rest. No, Danny agreed, but it's a start. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the ticking of the wood stove and the distant howl of wind through trees. Kevin's not going to stop, Ethan said eventually. I know. So what do we do? Danny was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, we wait for him to make a mistake, and when he does, we make sure Margaret's there to bury him with it. It wasn't the answer Ethan wanted, but it was the only answer they had. 2 days later, Margaret called with news. I found another victim, woman named Jessica Torres. Kevin dated her 3 years ago. He put her in the hospital twice, once with a concussion, once with broken ribs. Did she press charges? Danny asked. They had her on speakerphone. She tried. Sheriff Price told her if she didn't drop it, he'd make sure everyone knew she was a prostitute. Margaret's voice was ice cold. She wasn't. She was a waitress. But the sheriff spread rumors anyway, and Jessica had to leave town. Where is she now? Billings. She's willing to testify, but she's terrified. Kevin's been sending her messages for years, threatening her, reminding her that his family has reach. Ethan leaned forward. Can we use her testimony? If we can keep her alive long enough to get her in front of a judge, yes. Margaret paused. I'm filing a civil suit on her behalf. If the criminal system won't hold Kevin accountable, we'll bankrupt him instead. What do you need from us? Protection. For Jessica, for Sarah, for Lily. Kevin knows we're building a case now. He's going to escalate. Margaret's tone turned grim. He's also hired a lawyer, Brad Sullivan. Expensive, ruthless, the kind of attorney who gets guilty men acquitted because he's willing to destroy witnesses on the stand. Danny swore quietly. This is going to get ugly. It already is ugly, Margaret said. Now it's about to get public. She hung up. Ethan stood and walked outside where the afternoon sun did nothing to warm the frozen ground. Garrett was working on his bike, replacing a brake line, hands black with grease. You look like shit, Garrett said without looking up. Feel like it too. Danny give you the speech about being patient? Yeah. Load of crap if you ask me. Garrett threw down his wrench. We're bikers, not Boy Scouts. Someone threatens a kid under our protection, we handle it. That's the code. The code also says we protect the club, Ethan said. Going after Kevin puts everyone at risk. So does doing nothing. Garrett finally looked at him. You know what's going to happen, right? We're going to sit here playing defense while Kevin circles like a shark. Eventually, he's going to find an opening, and when he does, someone's going to get hurt. Not if we're careful. Careful. Garrett laughed bitterly. When did we start being careful? He walked away before Ethan could respond, leaving his bike half assembled and tools scattered in the dirt. Luis appeared from the garage. He's just scared. Garrett doesn't get scared. Everyone gets scared. Luis lit a cigarette. He's scared we're going to fail that little girl. Scared Kevin's going to win because we tied our own hands. Scared we're not who we think we are. Ethan understood that fear intimately. That night, Kevin struck again. Sarah's car, an ancient Honda she'd parked behind the clubhouse, was found with all 4 tires slashed and "whore" spray-painted across the windshield. No one had heard anything. No one had seen anything. Kevin had come and gone like smoke. Sarah stood in the parking lot staring at the destruction, her face empty of expression. Lily clutched her mother's leg, burying her face in Sarah's jeans. He was here, Sarah whispered. While we slept, he was right outside. Danny put a hand on her shoulder. We'll fix it. How? Sarah's voice cracked. How do you fix this? He's never going to stop. Never. And eventually, you'll all get tired of protecting us, and we'll be alone again, and he'll... She broke off, covering her mouth to stifle a sob. Lily looked up at Ethan with those huge gray eyes. Are you going to let him hurt us? The question hit him like a bullet to the chest. No, Ethan said. Promise? He knelt down to her level. I promise. Lily nodded solemnly, like she'd just witnessed a sacred vow. Then she wrapped her small arms around his neck and held on tight. Ethan stood with the child clinging to him, feeling the weight of a promise he didn't know how to keep. Around him, his brothers watched in silence. Above them, the Montana sky stretched endlessly, indifferent to human suffering. And somewhere out there in the darkness, Kevin Price was laughing. Margaret filed an emergency motion the next morning demanding immediate enforcement of the restraining order. The judge scheduled a hearing for the following week. In the meantime, the Iron Wolves increased patrols and installed security cameras around the clubhouse perimeter. But Kevin didn't come back. 3 days passed, then 4. The silence was worse than the threats. He's planning something, Hound said over breakfast. I can feel it. Or he's backing off, Sarah said hopefully. Maybe he finally realized we're serious. No one had the heart to tell her that men like Kevin never backed off. They just changed tactics. On the 5th day, Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Yeah. This is Detective Sarah Chen, Montana State Police. The voice was professional, clipped. Is this Ethan Graves? Ethan's stomach dropped. Yeah. I need you to come down to the station. We have some questions about a fire at Kevin Price's residence last night. The world tilted sideways. A fire? Someone poured gasoline around the perimeter of his house and lit it. Kevin managed to get out, but the property's a total loss. A pause. Several witnesses saw a motorcycle matching yours in the area around the time it started. Ethan's blood turned to ice. I was here all night. Can anyone verify that? He looked around the clubhouse. Danny, Garrett, Luis, Hound, they'd all been here. They could all vouch for him. But Kevin had witnesses who'd swear they saw Ethan's bike. I didn't do it, Ethan said. Then you won't mind coming in to answer some questions. Detective Chen's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Danny grabbed the phone from Ethan's hand. This is Danny Cole. Ethan's not going anywhere without an attorney present. He's not under arrest. We just want to talk. Then you can talk to our lawyer, Margaret Hayes. I'll have her contact you. Danny hung up and immediately called Margaret. We've got a problem. Within an hour, the situation became clear. Kevin had burned his own house down and was claiming Ethan did it. He had 3 witnesses, all friends of his uncle, who would testify they saw a Harley matching Ethan's description leaving the scene. Security footage from a gas station showed someone in a leather vest filling a gas can around midnight. The person in the footage had their face covered. Could have been anyone, but Kevin was betting it looked enough like Ethan to make the charges stick. This is brilliant, actually, Margaret said grimly over speakerphone. Kevin destroys evidence of his own abuse, anything in that house that could link him to other victims, gets insurance money, and frames Ethan for arson in one move. Can they make it stick? Danny asked. If those witnesses testify? Maybe. It'll be our word against theirs, and we're a motorcycle club. Juries don't usually side with bikers. Margaret was quiet for a moment. I'm going to need alibi witnesses. Anyone who can confirm Ethan was at the clubhouse all night. We all can, Louise said. Family testimony isn't always credible, especially from a club with your reputation. Margaret sighed. But it's what we've got. I'll set up a meeting with Detective Chen. In the meantime, Ethan, do not leave that property. Do not go near Kevin. Do not do anything that could make this worse. She hung up. Everyone stared at each other. He's trying to take you out of the equation, Garrett said to Ethan. You're the one Sarah and Lily trust most. He gets rid of you. They're vulnerable. It's not going to work, Danny said firmly. We've got alibis. Margaret's good. She'll tear this apart. But Ethan wasn't so sure. He'd lived his whole life knowing the system wasn't built for men like him. One accusation, and everything he'd done to protect Lily would be twisted into evidence of his guilt. That night, Lily found him sitting outside on the porch steps, staring at nothing. She sat down beside him without saying anything, her purple cast bright in the moonlight. After a while, she said, Mommy's crying again. I know. She thinks you're going to leave. Ethan looked at her. I'm not leaving. Promise? I already promised you once. I know, but sometimes people break promises. Lily picked at the edge of her cast. Kevin promised he'd never hurt me. Then he did. Ethan's chest constricted. I'm not Kevin. I know. She leaned against his arm. You smell like motorcycles. Sorry. I like it. She was quiet for another moment. Then she said, Are you scared? The question caught him off guard. Yeah. Me too. Lily looked up at him. But brave people get scared too, right? Ethan thought about that. About fear and courage. About the difference between running toward danger and running from it. About a 5-year-old girl who'd survived more than most adults ever would. Yeah, he said. Brave people get scared too. Lily smiled and went back inside, leaving Ethan alone with the Montana darkness and the weight of promises he wasn't sure he could keep. 2 days later, Detective Chen showed up at the clubhouse with a warrant for Ethan's arrest. He stood in the doorway while she read him his rights, his brothers forming a wall behind him, Lily watching from the window with tears streaming down her face. Ethan Graves, you're under arrest for first-degree arson and terroristic threatening. You have the right to remain silent. The words washed over him like static. He saw Danny's furious expression, saw Garrett's hand moving toward his waistband where he kept his peace, saw Sarah holding Lily back, the little girl screaming his name. He let them cuff him without resistance, let them lead him to the police car while Kevin's smug face flashed through his mind. As they drove away from the clubhouse, Ethan looked back one last time and saw Lily pressed against the window, her small hand flat against the glass. He'd made her a promise, and he'd just broken it. The holding cell smelled like piss and disinfectant. Ethan sat on a metal bench bolted to the concrete wall, his wrists still aching from the cuffs they'd finally removed. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, never dimming, never giving him the mercy of darkness. Across the narrow corridor, a drunk slept off whatever he'd been drinking, snoring like a chainsaw. Down the hall, someone was screaming about spiders that weren't there. Ethan had been in cells before. County lockup in Wyoming. Overnight holding in Idaho after a bar fight went wrong. Even 72 hours in a federal facility when the ATF thought the Iron Wolves were running guns. He knew how to do time, keep your mouth shut, your eyes open, and your back to the wall. But this was different. This wasn't just his freedom on the line. Lily's face pressed against that window kept playing in his head like a broken film reel, her hand flat on the glass, her mouth forming his name, the way Sarah had to physically hold her back while Detective Chen led him away in handcuffs. I promised her. The thought circled like a vulture. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. A guard appeared, older guy with a beer gut and tired eyes. Graves, your lawyer's here. They led him to a cramped interview room painted the color of old vomit. Margaret Hayes sat at a metal table with her briefcase open, papers spread out like battle plans. She didn't look up when he entered. Sit. Ethan sat. The guard left, locking the door behind him. Margaret finally met his eyes. Did you burn down Kevin Price's house? No. Were you anywhere near his property last night? I was at the clubhouse, all night. Can anyone besides your club brothers verify that? Ethan's jaw tightened. No. Margaret closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. Then we have a problem. Kevin's got 3 witnesses who'll swear they saw your bike. Security footage from a gas station showing someone matching your description filling a gas can. And a motive. You wanted to scare him away from Sarah and Lily. It's a setup. Of course it's a setup. Margaret's voice was ice cold. But it's a good one. Kevin burned his own house, destroyed evidence, collected insurance money, and got you arrested in one move. The man's smarter than we gave him credit for. Ethan leaned forward. So get me out. Bail hearings tomorrow morning. The DA's arguing you're a flight risk and a danger to the community. She pulled out a document. They're also pushing for a gag order. If this goes to trial, they don't want you or your club talking to the press. What about Sarah and Lily? Still at the clubhouse. Danny's maintaining security. Margaret's expression softened slightly. The little girl's asking for you. The words hit him like a punch to the throat. He looked away, focusing on a water stain in the corner of the ceiling. I made her a promise, he said quietly. Then let me do my job so you can keep it. Margaret gathered her papers. Don't talk to anyone, don't make any statements, and for the love of everything, don't lose your temper in here. Kevin wants you to look dangerous. Prove him wrong. She left. The guard took Ethan back to his cell where the drunk had woken up and was now vomiting into the toilet. The smell made Ethan's stomach turn, but he forced himself to breathe through it, to focus on anything except the walls closing in. Hours passed. The lights never dimmed. Meals came in styrofoam trays, gray meat, grayer vegetables, bread that tasted like cardboard. Ethan ate because he needed fuel, not because he tasted anything. Around midnight, a new guard appeared. Younger, muscular. A smirk on his face that made Ethan's instincts scream. Phone call? The guard said. I already talked to my lawyer. This one's different. The guard's smirk widened. Personal. Ethan followed him down a corridor he hadn't seen before, deeper into the building where the lights flickered and the air felt heavier. They stopped at a payphone mounted on the wall, the kind that hadn't existed outside of prisons for 20 years. The guard handed him the receiver. You've got 5 minutes. Ethan pressed it to his ear. Yeah. Comfortable in there? Kevin's voice was slurred, drunk, and triumphant. Because you're going to be there a while. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. How'd you get this number? My uncle runs this place, remember? I can call you whenever I want, visit whenever I want. Hell, I could probably arrange for you to have an accident in the showers if I felt like it. Kevin laughed. But that'd be too easy. I want you to sit in there knowing what's happening on the outside. What are you talking about? Sarah came to see me today. Kevin's voice dropped lower. Begging me to drop the charges against you. Said she'd do anything. And I mean anything. Ethan's blood turned to ice. You're lying. Am I? She showed up at my brother's place where I've been staying since the fire, wearing that little blue dress I always liked. Hair done up nice. Said if I testified that I made a mistake, that it wasn't you I saw, she'd come back to me. Kevin paused. Said she'd even bring Lily. The words carved through Ethan's chest like a dull blade. She wouldn't. Desperate people do desperate things, and Sarah's real desperate to save you. Another laugh, crueler this time. I told her I'd think about it. Told her to come back tomorrow night. We'll see how badly she wants you out of that cell. The line went dead. Ethan stood there with the receiver in his hand, the dial tone buzzing in his ear like angry wasps. The guard was watching him with that same smirk, clearly enjoying whatever expression had crossed Ethan's face. Time's up. They led him back to his cell. Ethan sat on the metal bench and stared at the wall, Kevin's words echoing in his skull. Sarah wouldn't go back to Kevin. She wouldn't. Not after everything. Not after Lily's broken arm and the bruises and the terror. But desperation made people do things they swore they'd never do. And if Sarah thought sacrificing herself could save Ethan, she might actually do it. He needed to get out. Now. The bail hearing happened the next morning in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and broken promises. Ethan stood in an orange jumpsuit while Margaret argued that he had no criminal record for violent offenses, had strong ties to the community, and posed no flight risk. The DA, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a voice like a prosecutor from a TV show, countered that Ethan was a member of a known motorcycle club with connections across state lines, had access to weapons and cash, and had already demonstrated he was willing to commit arson to intimidate a witness. The defendant is a danger to Kevin Price and his family, the DA said. Releasing him would put innocent lives at risk. Kevin Price broke a child's arm, Margaret shot back. Let's not pretend he's the victim here. The judge, an older man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, held up a hand. Enough. Bail is set at $50,000. The defendant is ordered to surrender his passport and wear a GPS monitor. He is not to come within 1,000 feet of Kevin Price or his known associates. Margaret didn't react, but Ethan saw the tension in her shoulders. 50,000. The Iron Wolves didn't have that kind of cash lying around. They led him back to holding while Margaret made phone calls. 2 hours later, the guard returned. You made bail. Let's go. Ethan changed back into his clothes, jeans, t-shirt, leather vest that smelled like motor oil and cigarette smoke. They fitted him with an ankle monitor that felt like a shackle, then processed him out through a door that opened onto a parking lot where Danny waited beside his bike. Took you long enough, Danny said. Who posted bail? Margaret called in a favor, some bondsman she knows. Danny handed him a helmet. We need to move, now. They rode in silence through streets still wet from morning rain. The world looked different after 2 days in a cell. Colors too bright, sounds too loud, everything sharp-edged and hostile. Ethan gripped the handlebars of his own bike that Danny had brought, letting the familiar rumble between his legs ground him back to reality. The clubhouse appeared through the trees like a fortress. More bikes than usual crowded the parking lot. Word had spread, and brothers from other chapters had shown up to help. Garrett stood on the porch with a rifle across his lap. Luis was on the roof. Hound patrolled the perimeter with a German shepherd Ethan had never seen before. When did we get a dog? Ethan asked. Yesterday. Hound says he's trained to smell cops from a mile away. Danny killed his engine. We're in full lockdown, no one in or out without clearance. Inside, the clubhouse had transformed into a war room. Maps covered the walls. Kevin's usual routes, his brother's house, Sheriff Price's office, known associates. Photographs pinned beside the maps showed faces Ethan didn't recognize. A whiteboard listed names, dates, connections drawn in red marker like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Sarah sat at the table with her head in her hands. Lily was nowhere in sight. Where's the kid? Ethan asked. Sarah looked up, her face pale and hollow. Sleeping. She cried herself sick last night. Ethan crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. Kevin called me. Said you went to see him. Sarah's eyes widened. What? No, I would never. He said you showed up at his brother's place, begging him to drop the charges. That's a lie. Sarah's voice broke. I haven't left this building in 3 days. Ask anyone. Danny confirmed it with a nod. She's been here the whole time. Relief and rage warred in Ethan's chest. Kevin had lied to mess with his head, to make him doubt Sarah, to fracture the one thing holding them all together, trust. He's escalating, Margaret's voice came from the doorway. She stepped inside carrying her briefcase and looking more exhausted than Ethan had ever seen her. Kevin knows we're building a case. He's trying to drive wedges between all of you before we get to trial. It's working, Garrett muttered from his position by the window. Margaret set her briefcase on the table and pulled out a folder. I have news. My investigator found something. Everyone gathered around as she spread photographs across the table. Crime scene photos, hospital records, police reports. Kevin Price has been doing this for 12 years, Margaret said quietly. We found 7 women. 7. All of them too scared to press charges. All of them threatened by Sheriff Dale Price. She pointed to one photograph, a woman with a black eye and a broken nose. This is Amanda Mitchell. Kevin put her in the hospital 4 years ago. Sheriff Price told her if she filed charges, he'd make sure her son was taken by CPS. Another photo. Lisa Brennan. Kevin dislocated her shoulder. She tried to get a restraining order. Sheriff Price lost the paperwork. Another. Rebecca Hall. Concussion, cracked ribs, cigarette burns on her arms. She went to the police 3 times. Sheriff Price arrested her for filing false reports. Margaret's voice was steel. Kevin Price is a serial abuser protected by a corrupt sheriff, and we're going to prove it. Ethan stared at the photographs, at the faces of women who'd survived what Lily was surviving now. Will they testify? 3 of them will. The others are too scared. Margaret met his eyes. But 3 is enough. Combined with Lily's medical records, Sarah's testimony, and the pattern of abuse, we can bury him. What about the arson charges? Danny asked. I'm working on that. The gas station footage is grainy. Could be anyone in that leather vest. And your alibis, while not perfect, are consistent. Margaret pulled out another document. But there's something else. The fire investigator found accelerant patterns consistent with arson, but also evidence that someone poured gasoline inside the house before lighting the perimeter. Kevin claims he was asleep when the fire started, woke up to smoke, barely escaped. So if he was asleep inside, how did he get out without burns? Without smoke inhalation serious enough to require hospitalization? Margaret's eyes glinted. I think Kevin set the fire himself, poured the gasoline, then left through a back window. He wasn't in any danger. It was theater. Luis whistled low. Can you prove it? Give me time. Margaret started gathering the photographs. In the meantime, Kevin's going to keep pushing. He knows we're close. Expect him to do something desperate. She was right. That night, around 10 o'clock, Lily woke up screaming. Sarah ran to the back room while Ethan and Danny rushed in behind her. Lily sat up in bed, her eyes wide with terror, pointing at the window. He was there, she gasped. I saw him. Ethan looked at the window. The curtain hung open slightly, and beyond it, only darkness and the shapes of trees swaying in the wind. Who did you see, baby? Sarah asked, pulling Lily close. Kevin. Lily's whole body shook. He was standing outside looking at me. Garrett and Luis were already outside, flashlights cutting through the darkness, weapons drawn. Ethan joined them, his heart pounding, every nerve on fire. They swept the perimeter, searching for footprints, broken branches, any sign someone had been there. They found nothing. Kid probably had a nightmare, Luis said. But Ethan wasn't so sure. He stood at the spot where Lily claimed she'd seen Kevin and looked back at the window. From this angle, you could see directly into the room where she slept. The curtain hung open just enough. If someone had been standing here, Lily would have seen them clearly. He was here, Ethan said. How? Garrett gestured around. We've got cameras, motion sensors, a perimeter alarm. Nothing triggered. Then he knows how to avoid them. Danny appeared beside them. Or someone's helping him. The words hung in the cold night air like a death sentence. Back inside, Sarah refused to let Lily sleep alone. She dragged a mattress into the main room where everyone could see them, where the lights stayed on and men with guns kept watch through the windows. Ethan poured himself coffee he didn't want and stood by the wood stove, trying to make sense of how Kevin could have gotten that close without setting off a single alarm. We've got a leak, Danny said quietly, joining him. Someone's feeding him information. One of ours? I don't know. Danny rubbed his face. But if someone in the club is helping Kevin, we're all dead. The thought was poison. The Iron Wolves were built on loyalty, on brotherhood, on the idea that they could trust each other when the rest of the world turned its back. If that trust was broken, if someone had betrayed them, the club was finished. We need to find out who, Ethan said. How? Start interrogating brothers, accuse people without proof? Danny's voice was strained. That'll tear us apart faster than any snitch could. He was right. But doing nothing meant letting Kevin keep circling, keep pushing, keep threatening the people they'd sworn to protect. Ethan was about to respond when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. He answered without thinking. Yeah, you're all going to die. The voice was distorted, run through some kind of filter that made it sound mechanical and inhuman. Kevin knows where you are. He knows your patrols. He knows which brother takes the first watch, and which one falls asleep at 3 a.m. He knows Sarah sleeps with a nightlight, and Lily cries in her sleep. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Who is this? Someone who's tired of watching you pretend to be heroes. The distorted voice took on a mocking tone. You think you're protecting that little girl? You're just making it worse. Kevin's coming for her, and when he does, none of you will be able to stop him. If you're so brave, why don't you show your face? Because I don't need to. A pause. Check the garage. The line went dead. Ethan looked at Danny. Garage, now. They ran, boots pounding on wooden floors, other brothers following. The garage door hung open slightly. Impossible, because it had been locked from the inside. Ethan kicked it wide and reached for the light switch. The lights flickered on, revealing a scene from a nightmare. Kevin's truck sat in the middle of the garage bay, engine cold, doors open. On the hood, someone had arranged photographs, pictures of Lily sleeping, of Sarah getting dressed, of the clubhouse from angles that should have been impossible to shoot without being seen. Dozens of them, spread out like tarot cards promising death, and spray-painted across the truck's windshield in dripping red letters. She's already mine. Jesus Christ, Luis whispered. Danny circled the truck, examining it like a bomb that might explode. How did this get in here? No one had an answer. The garage had been locked. The security cameras should have caught anyone approaching, but somehow Kevin, or someone working for him, had driven a truck into their garage, left photographs of their most vulnerable moments, and disappeared without a trace. We've been compromised, Garrett said, his voice hollow. Completely. Ethan stared at the photographs of Lily, sleeping, vulnerable, trusting that the men around her would keep her safe. And they'd failed. Someone had walked right up to that window and taken pictures while she dreamed, while armed bikers stood guard less than 50 feet away. Sarah appeared in the doorway, took one look at the scene, and her legs gave out. Danny caught her before she hit the ground. We have to leave, she gasped. We have to take Lily and run, right now, before he... Running won't help. Margaret's voice cut through the panic. She'd appeared behind Sarah, her face grim. Kevin's got resources, money, connections. If you run, he'll find you, and next time, there won't be anyone to help. So what do we do? Sarah's voice rose to a scream. Let him kill us? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, We set a trap. Everyone turned to look at her. Kevin's overconfident now, Margaret continued. He thinks he's won, thinks he's untouchable. So we use that against him. She pulled out her phone. I'm going to leak information that Sarah's leaving tomorrow morning, taking Lily and running. We'll make sure Kevin hears about it through channels he trusts. And then, Ethan asked, then we see if he takes the bait. Margaret's eyes were cold. If he tries to intercept them, we'll have him on kidnapping charges, multiple witnesses, video evidence, something even his uncle can't make disappear. You want to use Sarah and Lily as bait? Garrett's voice was dangerous. I want to end this, Margaret said. Kevin's not going to stop. Not until he either has them back or they're dead. So we force his hand, make him show himself, and when he does, we destroy him. The silence that followed was suffocating. No, Ethan said. Too dangerous. Everything's dangerous now, Margaret countered, but this is our best shot at putting Kevin away for good. What if something goes wrong? Sarah whispered. What if he gets to us before you can stop him? He won't. Margaret's voice was absolute. Because we'll have every member of the Iron Wolves watching that route. Law enforcement on standby. The second Kevin makes a move, we'll have him. Danny looked at Ethan. It could work. Or it could get them killed. They're going to die anyway if we don't stop Kevin. Danny's voice was raw. You know that. We all know that. Ethan turned away, staring at the photograph spread across the truck hood. Lily's sleeping face. Innocent, trusting, waiting for him to save her. He thought about the promise he'd made, about the way she'd looked at him through that window as the cops drove him away. about the weight of a 5-year-old girl's belief that he was something other than what he'd always been. "When?" he asked without turning around. "Tomorrow morning," Margaret said. "Early. Before Kevin has time to plan anything elaborate. And if he doesn't take the bait? Then we go to Plan B." "What's Plan B?" Margaret didn't answer, and Ethan realized there wasn't one. This was it, the last card they had left to play. That night, nobody slept. They spent hours going over the plan, mapping routes, assigning positions, checking weapons and communication equipment. Sarah sat in a corner with Lily on her lap, both of them silent, both of them knowing what tomorrow meant. Around 3 a.m., Ethan stepped outside for air. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and his breath came out in clouds. Stars scattered across the sky like shrapnel from some cosmic explosion. Footsteps crunched in the frost behind him. "Sarah." "I'm scared," she said simply. "Me too. Will this work?" Ethan didn't lie to her. "I don't know." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Thank you for everything. For answering when Lily called, for not leaving us even when it got dangerous, for being the kind of man who keeps promises. I haven't kept it yet." "You're still here. That counts." Sarah looked back at the clubhouse where Lily slept on that mattress on the floor, surrounded by armed men who'd die before letting anyone hurt her. "She loves you, you know, Lily. She talks about you like you're some kind of superhero." The words hit Ethan somewhere deep in his chest. "I'm not." "To her, you are." Sarah turned to face him fully. Kevin used to tell her that monsters were real, that they lived in closets and under beds, that they'd come for her if she wasn't good. Her voice broke. "You showed her that heroes are real too." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He'd never been anyone's hero, never been anything except a weapon pointed in whatever direction violence was needed. But standing here in the frozen darkness, with a terrified mother thanking him for saving her daughter, he felt something shift inside his chest. Not redemption, not forgiveness, but maybe the first step toward becoming someone who deserved a 5-year-old girl's trust. "Get some sleep," he said finally. "Tomorrow's going to be hell." Sarah nodded and went back inside. Ethan stayed outside a while longer, smoking a cigarette he'd bummed off Hound, watching the sky slowly lighten with the approach of dawn. By the time the sun rose, everyone was in position. Sarah and Lily would drive south in a borrowed car, taking the main highway toward Missoula. Danny and Luis would tail them at a distance. Garrett and Hound would sweep ahead, making sure the route was clear. Ethan would ride parallel on back roads, ready to converge if anything went wrong. Margaret had made sure the leak reached Kevin through 3 separate channels, all of them people he trusted, all of them convinced they were helping him track down his runaway girlfriend. If Kevin took the bait, he'd try to intercept them somewhere along that highway, and when he did, they'd have him. Sarah strapped Lily into the car seat, kissed her forehead, and whispered something Ethan couldn't hear. Lily clutched her stuffed bear and looked around at all the scary men with guns and motorcycles, her eyes huge. "Ethan?" she called. He crossed to the car and knelt beside her window. "Yeah?" "You promised you wouldn't leave." "I'm not leaving. I'm going to be right there the whole time." He pointed to his bike. "You won't see me, but I'll see you. Okay?" Lily nodded slowly. Then she reached through the window and touched his scarred knuckles. "Be careful." Something in Ethan's throat closed up. "You too, kid." Sarah started the engine. Danny and Luis fired up their bikes. One by one, they pulled out of the clubhouse parking lot and onto the dirt road that led to the highway. Ethan watched them disappear around the first bend, then turned to Margaret, who stood on the porch with her phone in her hand. "If this goes wrong," he started. "It won't," Margaret said, but her eyes told a different story. Ethan climbed on his bike and kicked it to life. The engine roared, vibrating through his bones, familiar and dangerous and honest. He pointed the machine toward the back roads and tore off into the Montana wilderness, riding parallel to the highway where a 5-year-old girl was driving straight into danger because the adults in her life had run out of better options. The morning air was cold enough to burn. Frost clung to tree branches. The sky was clear and blue and indifferent to human suffering. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. Danny. Target acquired. Black SUV following Sarah's car, 3 vehicles back. His blood turned to adrenaline. Kevin had taken the bait. Another buzz. Luis. Second vehicle joining from on-ramp, gray pickup, Montana plates. Could be backup. This was happening, right now. Kevin was making his move. Ethan opened the throttle, his bike screaming through back roads, cutting across terrain that would have killed a car. He needed to get ahead of Sarah's position, needed to be ready when Kevin made his play. The radio crackled. Margaret's voice. Law enforcement is 10 minutes out. Keep visual contact. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. 10 minutes. An eternity in situations like this. Ethan burst out of the forest onto a service road that ran parallel to the highway. Below him, he could see the line of traffic, could pick out Sarah's car, the black SUV stalking it, the gray pickup closing in, and then everything went wrong. The gray pickup accelerated, pulled alongside Sarah's car, and forced it toward the shoulder. Sarah tried to speed up, but the black SUV cut her off from behind. She was boxed in, nowhere to go. Two vehicles pushing her toward the exit ramp that led away from the highway and into the wilderness. Danny and Luis tried to intercept, but a third vehicle, a white van that appeared from nowhere, blocked their path. Deliberate, coordinated. This wasn't Kevin acting alone. Ethan didn't think. He pointed his bike straight down the embankment toward the highway, gravity and momentum carrying him faster than should have been possible. The bike hit the pavement hard enough to rattle his teeth, but he kept it upright, kept accelerating, kept pushing toward Sarah's car that was now being herded onto a dirt road that disappeared into the forest. The radio exploded with voices. Margaret shouting coordinates, Danny calling for backup, Luis reporting that he'd been blocked by the van and couldn't pursue. Ethan was the only one close enough. He followed Sarah's car and its pursuers onto the dirt road, engine screaming, tires throwing up gravel. The black SUV realized he was behind them and slammed on its brakes. Ethan swerved, barely avoiding a collision, and watched as Kevin Price leaned out the passenger window with something in his hand. Not a gun. A phone. "If you follow us," Kevin shouted over the sound of engines, "I'll kill them both right now. Sheriff's already got arrest warrants for all of you. Obstruction, witness tampering, you chase me, you go to prison, and Lily still ends up dead." Ethan's bike slowed, torn between every instinct screaming at him to chase them down and the knowledge that Kevin was right. If he pursued, he'd be arrested, and Kevin would still have Sarah and Lily. The black SUV accelerated, disappearing around a bend in the road. The gray pickup stayed behind, blocking Ethan's path, driver's face hidden behind tinted windows. For 3 seconds, Ethan sat there on his idling bike, watching them take Lily away. Then he twisted the throttle and charged straight at the gray pickup. The pickup driver panicked and swerved. Ethan shot past, leaning into a turn that nearly threw him off the bike, chasing the black SUV deeper into the forest where law enforcement couldn't follow and brotherhood meant nothing against men willing to murder a child. The radio crackled again, Margaret's voice, desperate. "Ethan, stand down. You're throwing away any chance we have at a legal—" He ripped the radio off his belt and threw it into the trees. Ahead, the black SUV skidded around a corner. Ethan followed, the world narrowing down to speed and rage, and the single-minded need to get to Lily before Kevin did something irreversible. The road ended at an abandoned logging camp, rusted equipment, collapsing structures, ghosts of an industry that had moved on decades ago. The black SUV stopped in the center of the clearing. Kevin stepped out, and this time he did have a gun. He pressed it against the window where Lily sat screaming in her car seat. "Get off the bike," Kevin said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "Or I pull the trigger and you get to watch her die knowing it's your fault." Ethan killed the engine. Silence rushed in. Just the wind through dead trees and Lily's muffled crying from inside the car. He climbed off the bike slowly, hands visible, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to explode. "That's better." Kevin kept the gun pressed against the window. Sarah was visible in the driver's seat, her hands on the wheel, her face white with terror. "You know what your problem is, Iron? You think being tough makes you dangerous, but real danger is being untouchable." He tapped his chest. "That's me. Untouchable. My uncle's the sheriff. My dad's a county councilman. My lawyer's the best money can buy. And you? You're just a criminal in a leather vest who made the mistake of thinking he could save people." "Let them go," Ethan said, his voice flat. "This is between us. Oh, it stopped being between us the second you put your hands on my girlfriend and my kid. Kevin's finger tightened on the trigger. Now it's about teaching you what happens when you interfere in other people's business. Behind Kevin, the forest was alive with sounds Ethan couldn't place. Engines in the distance, branches snapping, voices carried on the wind. The iron wolves were coming. Margaret's law enforcement contacts were coming. Help was minutes away. But minutes meant nothing when a man with a gun stood inches from a 5-year-old girl's head. You want me? Take me, Ethan said. But let Sarah drive away with Lily first. You can do whatever you want to me after. Kevin tilted his head, considering. You'd trade yourself for them? Yes. Why? They're nothing to you. They're everything, Ethan said, and realized as he said it that it was true. Kevin laughed. You're even dumber than I thought. He raised the gun, pointing it at Ethan now instead of Lily. But sure, I'll let them go. Right after I put a bullet in you and make that little girl watch the man she thinks is a hero die bleeding in the dirt. He pulled the trigger. The gunshot split the morning air like the world ending. The bullet never reached Ethan. Kevin's hand jerked sideways at the last second. Someone had hit him from behind with enough force to throw off his aim. The shot went wild, burying itself in a tree trunk 3 feet to Ethan's left. Kevin stumbled forward, and Ethan saw who'd hit him. Danny Cole, appearing from the tree line like vengeance in leather and denim, swinging a tire iron with the precision of a man who'd done this before. Kevin went down hard, the gun skittering across the dirt. Ethan lunged for it, his fingers closing around cold metal just as Kevin's boot caught him in the ribs. The impact drove the air from his lungs, but he held on to the gun, rolled with the momentum, came up in a crouch with the weapon pointed at Kevin's chest. Don't, Ethan said, his voice raw. Kevin froze halfway to standing. Blood ran from a gash on his temple where Danny's tire iron had connected. His eyes were wild, cornered animal frantic. You won't shoot me. Not with witnesses. Try me. The sound of engines filled the clearing, motorcycles, trucks, vehicles pouring in from every direction. The Iron Wolves arrived first, 20 bikes strong. Brothers Ethan hadn't seen in years emerging from the forest like an army summoned from the earth itself. Behind them came the law enforcement Margaret had promised. State police, federal marshals, vehicles with lights blazing and sirens wailing. Kevin looked around at the forces surrounding him and started laughing. High-pitched, unhinged, the laugh of a man watching his empire collapse in real time. You think this changes anything? Kevin's voice cracked. My uncle's the sheriff. My lawyer's already drafting appeals. I'll be out by tomorrow. Your uncle's in handcuffs, Margaret Hayes' voice cut through the clearing. She stepped from one of the unmarked cars, her business suit somehow still pristine despite the forest dirt and chaos. As of 20 minutes ago, Sheriff Dale Price was arrested on federal corruption charges, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and that's just the beginning. Kevin's laughter died. What? Did you really think we weren't investigating him too? Margaret's smile was cold enough to frost glass. Every accusation he buried, every witness he threatened, every case he made disappear. The FBI's been building a file for 6 months. You were just the catalyst they needed to bring him down. The color drained from Kevin's face. Without his uncle's protection, he was just a man who'd terrorized women and children for 12 years. Just a coward with expensive lawyers and nowhere left to hide. A female marshal approached Sarah's car. Ma'am, you're safe now. Can you step out of the vehicle? Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't unbuckle her seatbelt. The marshal did it for her, helping her out with the gentleness of someone who understood trauma. Then she opened the back door and carefully unbuckled Lily from her car seat. Lily was still crying, clutching her stuffed bear, her purple cast pressed against her chest. The marshal lifted her out and tried to carry her toward one of the police vehicles. But Lily twisted in her arms, searching the crowd. "Ethan!" she screamed. "I want Ethan!" The sound of her voice broke something in Ethan's chest. He handed the gun to Danny and crossed the clearing, his ribs screaming where Kevin had kicked him, his hands still shaking from adrenaline. The marshal looked at him, scarred face, leather vest, patches that marked him as an outlaw, and hesitated. "Let him," Margaret said quietly. "He's the one she trusts." The marshal set Lily down. The little girl ran across the dirt and threw herself at Ethan, wrapping her small arms around his neck with enough force to knock him back a step. He caught her, held her against his chest, and felt her whole body shaking. "You came," she sobbed into his shoulder. "You came, you came, you came." "I promised," Ethan said, his voice rough. "I always keep my promises." Around them, law enforcement swarmed Kevin Price. They cuffed him, read him his rights, loaded him into the back of a squad car while he shouted about lawsuits and false arrests and how his father would destroy all of them. But his voice was drowned out by the sound of motorcycle engines, by the iron wolves revving their bikes in a show of force that said without words, "This ends here." Sarah approached slowly, her face streaked with tears. Ethan carefully passed Lily to her mother, and Sarah held her daughter like she'd never let go again. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Danny appeared beside Ethan, the tire iron still in his hand. "You good?" "Ribs are probably cracked." "Figures. You always take the hard hits." Danny glanced at the squad car where Kevin sat screaming behind bulletproof glass. "Margaret says the feds want statements from all of us. Gonna be a long day." Ethan nodded, watching Sarah and Lily cling to each other, watching the law enforcement swarm the clearing, watching the iron wolves stand like silent sentinels, making sure no one got close to the family they'd claimed as their own. But something felt wrong. The pieces fit too perfectly. Kevin caught. Sheriff arrested. The cavalry arriving exactly when needed. "How'd you find us?" Ethan asked Danny. "GPS tracker. Margaret put one on Sarah's car." "No, I mean, how'd you know to come now? How'd you know Kevin would make his move at this exact location?" Danny's expression flickered. "We tracked the vehicles. 3 vehicles blocked us on the highway before we even got here. Coordinated. Professional. Kevin doesn't have that kind of organization." Ethan turned to face his brother fully. "Who else is involved?" Before Danny could answer, one of the state police officers approached Margaret with a tablet. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. "We have a problem," Margaret said. Everyone turned to her. The DA's office just received evidence, security footage, financial records, communications logs. Margaret's voice was tight. "Someone's been feeding Kevin information about our investigation, times, locations, witness names, everything." "Who?" Garrett demanded. Margaret's eyes swept the clearing, landing on faces Ethan had trusted for years. The footage shows someone from the Iron Wolves meeting with Kevin's associates, multiple times over the past 2 weeks. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan felt the ground tilt beneath him. Someone in the Brotherhood had betrayed them. Someone had fed Kevin information that put Lily in danger. Someone standing in this clearing right now was a traitor. "Show us," Danny said, his voice dead. Margaret pulled up the footage on her tablet. Grainy security camera feed from a bar parking lot. A man in an Iron Wolves vest walking toward a truck, where Kevin's uncle sat in the driver's seat. The angle was wrong to see the man's face clearly, but the vest was unmistakable. Club patches, territorial markers, the wolf insignia. "Can you identify him?" Margaret asked. Ethan studied the footage, the way the man walked, his height, build, the way he carried himself. Something familiar but wrong, like recognizing a voice on a phone call but not being able to place it. "Luis," Garrett said quietly. Everyone turned to look at Luis, who stood at the edge of the clearing beside his bike. For a moment, he didn't react. Then his hand moved toward his waistband where he kept his piece. "Don't," Hound said, his shotgun already raised. Luis froze. "I didn't—" "You met with Sheriff Price 4 times, Margaret said, her voice like steel. "We have footage, phone records, bank deposits into your account. $20,000 over 3 weeks. Luis's face crumpled. "He said he'd kill my sister. She lives in Billings. He showed me pictures of her apartment, her work schedule, where her kids go to school. Said if I didn't feed him information, she'd disappear." The words hit like bullets. Ethan had known Luis for 8 years, had ridden with him through 6 states, had trusted him with his life more times than he could count. "So you sold us out," Danny said, his voice flat and dangerous. "I didn't have a choice." Luis's voice broke. "He was going to kill Maria, kill her kids. I had to—" "You had to come to us," Garrett snarled. You had to trust your brothers instead of working with the man who broke a 5-year-old's arm. Luis looked around the clearing at faces that had once been brothers and were now something else. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Get him out of here, Danny said to the marshals. He's not one of ours anymore. They cuffed Luis and led him away while he cried and apologized and begged for understanding. Ethan watched him go and felt something die inside his chest. The brotherhood was supposed to be absolute, supposed to be stronger than blood, stronger than fear, stronger than anything the world could throw at them. But fear had won, and a traitor had almost cost them everything. Sarah held Lily tighter, the little girl's face pressed into her mother's neck, shielded from the sight of men she'd trusted turning on each other. We need to get them out of here, Margaret said. Protective custody until the trial. Kevin's father still has influence, and there are others in his network we haven't identified yet. How long? Sarah asked. 6 months. Maybe longer. We can't hide for 6 months. You can't go back to your normal life either, Margaret said gently. Not until every person in Kevin's circle is behind bars. Ethan felt the weight of that reality settle over them. 6 months of hiding. 6 months of looking over their shoulders. 6 months of Lily growing up in fear because the adults around her couldn't protect her from the world. I have a place, Danny said. Cabin in Wyoming, off the grid. No one knows about it except the club. The club had a traitor, Garrett pointed out. Luis didn't know about Wyoming. Danny met Ethan's eyes. It's safe. I'll make sure of it. Margaret considered this. I'd rather have them in federal custody. Federal custody means strange agents and safe houses and people Lily doesn't know, Ethan said. She's been through enough. Let her be somewhere that feels like home. Margaret looked at Lily, at the way the child clung to her mother, at the trust and terror warring in her small face. Fine, but I want daily check-ins. Any sign of trouble, they go into formal witness protection. Agreed? Everyone nodded. The clearing slowly emptied. Law enforcement vehicles pulling away with Kevin and Luis in separate cars. State police cordoning off the scene. Federal agents collecting evidence. The Iron Wolves remained, a wall of leather and loyalty surrounding the family they'd failed to protect. Ethan's ribs throbbed where Kevin had kicked him. His hands were scraped raw from gravel. His body felt like it had been put through a wood chipper and barely survived. But he was alive. Sarah was alive. Lily was alive. That counted for something. Danny pulled him aside while the others prepared to ride out. You did good today. Luis almost got them killed because I didn't see the betrayal coming. None of us did. Danny's voice was heavy. That's what makes it betrayal. It blindsides you. Ethan watched Sarah loading Lily into a borrowed SUV that would take them to Wyoming. The little girl turned at the last moment and waved at him, her purple cast bright against the afternoon sun. He waved back. You think we can really keep them safe? Ethan asked. For 6 months? Yeah. Danny lit a cigarette. After that? Depends on whether Margaret can put Kevin away for good. And if she can't? Danny didn't answer, because they both knew what happened if Kevin walked free. Men like him never stopped hunting, never stopped believing they owned the people they'd hurt. The SUV pulled away, disappearing down the dirt road toward the highway. Ethan stood there until the dust settled and the sound of the engine faded to nothing. Then he climbed on his bike and followed his brothers back to the clubhouse, riding through Montana wilderness that looked exactly the same as it had this morning, but felt fundamentally different, like the world had shifted on its axis and nothing would ever be stable again. The clubhouse was quiet when they arrived. No celebration, no victory drinks, just exhausted men sitting in silence, processing the fact that one of their own had betrayed them and a 5-year-old girl had almost died because of it. Garrett broke the silence first. We need to talk about what happens next. What's to talk about? Hound said. We wait for the trial. We make sure Sarah and Lily stay safe. We rebuild trust. Rebuilding trust takes years, Garrett said, and we don't have years. Kevin's father is a county councilman. His lawyer's already filing motions to suppress evidence. Sheriff Price is in custody, but his deputies are still out there, and half of them probably helped cover up Kevin's abuse. So we deal with them, Hound said. How? We can't fight the entire county. We can try. Danny raised a hand. Enough. We're not fighting anyone. We're keeping our heads down and letting Margaret do her job. Margaret needs witnesses who'll testify, Garrett countered, and every witness Kevin's previous victims are terrified. You saw the case files, 3 women willing to testify out of 7. That's not enough to guarantee a conviction. Then we find more, Ethan said. Everyone turned to look at him. Kevin's been doing this for 12 years, Ethan continued. There are more victims, more people he's hurt, more evidence we haven't found yet. He stood, ignoring the pain in his ribs. We dig, we find them, we bring them to Margaret, and we make damn sure Kevin never sees daylight again. That's not our job, Danny said carefully. Then whose job is it? Ethan's voice rose. The cops who ignored evidence for a decade? The DA who declined to press charges? The federal agents who only showed up after a kid got hurt? He looked around at his brothers. We're the only ones who gave a damn when it mattered, so yeah, it's our job, because no one else is going to do it. Silence fell over the clubhouse. He's right, Garrett said finally. We're all in this now. Might as well see it through. Danny rubbed his face, looking older than Ethan had ever seen him. Margaret's not going to like this. Margaret can deal, Ethan said. They spent the next 3 days hunting, not with guns or violence, but with patience and quiet conversations and the kind of determination that came from knowing a child's life depended on them getting this right. Garrett found a woman in Butte who dated Kevin 6 years ago. She'd left Montana after he broke her collarbone, and Sheriff Price told her pressing charges would ruin her life. It took 4 hours of gentle conversation before she agreed to talk to Margaret. Hound tracked down a bartender who'd witnessed Kevin drag a woman out of his bar by her hair. The bartender had called the cops. Sheriff Price had shown up, talked to Kevin for 5 minutes, and left without making an arrest. Ethan found Jessica Torres, the woman Margaret had mentioned weeks ago, living in a studio apartment in Billings with 3 locks on the door and curtains that stayed closed all day. She'd been running from Kevin for 3 years, changing her number every few months, looking over her shoulder every time she left the house. He still messages me, Jessica said, sitting across from Ethan in her tiny kitchen. Different numbers, but I know it's him, telling me he knows where I live, that he's coming back for me. He can't hurt you anymore, Ethan said. Jessica laughed bitterly. People have been telling me that for 3 years, and yet I still wake up every night thinking I hear his truck outside. This time's different. Why? Because you're here? She gestured at his vest, his scars, the evidence of violence written across his body. You're not so different from him, are you? Just another man who thinks he can solve problems with his fists. The words cut deeper than Ethan expected. Maybe, but I never hit a woman, never broke a kid's arm, never made anyone afraid to leave their house. Jessica studied him for a long moment. Then she said, Margaret Hayes called me yesterday, said she needs me to testify, that this time they've got enough evidence to make charges stick. She's right. And if she's wrong, if Kevin walks free and comes after me, he won't. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll be standing between you and him if he tries. Jessica looked at him, really looked, seeing past the leather and scars to whatever remained of the man underneath. Why do you care so much? What's that little girl to you? Ethan thought about Lily's hand pressed against the car window, about the way she'd called his name when she was scared, about the promise he'd made and almost broken. Everything, he said. Jessica was quiet for a while. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll testify. But if this goes wrong, if Kevin gets out and comes after me, I'm holding you responsible. Fair enough. By the end of the week, they had 6 women willing to testify. 6 voices saying out loud what had been whispered for years. 6 pieces of evidence that painted a picture of systematic abuse protected by corruption and fear. Margaret called a meeting at the clubhouse to review the testimony. She spread case files across the table, photographs, medical records, police reports that had been buried or ignored. The evidence of Kevin Price's violence laid bare for everyone to see. This is enough, Margaret said. With what we have now, I can guarantee a conviction. Guarantee? Danny said skeptically. Nothing's guaranteed in a courtroom, but this is as close as it gets. Margaret looked around the room. The trial starts in 2 weeks. I need all of you to keep these witnesses safe until then. Kevin's father is going to fight back. He's already hired private investigators to dig up dirt on everyone involved. Expect harassment, threats, attempts to intimidate witnesses into silence. Let them try, Garrett said. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Ethan's life. They rotated shifts protecting the witnesses, making sure no one was ever alone, escorting them to work and home and anywhere they needed to go. The Iron Wolves became a private security force built on leather and loyalty, and the shared belief that some battles were worth fighting even when the odds were stacked against you. Kevin's father made good on Margaret's prediction. Private investigators showed up at witnesses' workplaces asking questions. Anonymous calls came in the middle of the night, making threats. One woman had her tires slashed. Another found her apartment broken into. Nothing stolen, but everything disturbed. A message that said we can reach you whenever we want. Through it all, the Iron Wolves held the line. Ethan checked on Sarah and Lily every day via encrypted video calls. Lily had settled into the Wyoming cabin, riding horses and playing in the woods and slowly starting to smile again. Sarah looked exhausted but hopeful, like she was finally beginning to believe they might survive this. "How much longer?" Sarah asked during one call. "Trial starts Monday," Ethan said. "After that, depends on how long the jury takes." "And then we can come home?" Ethan didn't know how to answer that. Home meant the house Kevin had destroyed. Home meant a town where everyone knew her as the woman who'd accused a powerful family's son. Home meant looking over her shoulder for the rest of her life. "We'll figure it out," he said instead. The night before the trial, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat outside the clubhouse smoking cigarettes and watching stars wheel overhead, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. A phone call from a terrified child. A broken arm. A brotherhood torn apart by betrayal. 6 women brave enough to speak their truth. Danny found him around 3 a.m. "You should rest. Tomorrow's going to be hell." "Can't." "Yeah, me neither." Danny sat down beside him. "You know what I realized? We started this trying to save one kid, but along the way we ended up saving a lot more than that." Ethan thought about Jessica Torres and the other women who'd been living in fear for years, about the pattern of abuse that was finally being exposed, about a corrupt sheriff who'd used his badge to protect predators. "We didn't save them," Ethan said. "They saved themselves. We just gave them backup." "Still counts." Danny lit his own cigarette. "Your dad would have hated this, you know, all this legal process, all this patience. He'd have said real men solve problems with violence." Ethan's jaw tightened. "My dad was wrong about a lot of things." "Yeah, he was." Danny exhaled smoke into the darkness. "But you're proving that every day." The trial began on a Monday morning in a courthouse that smelled like old wood and decades of bitter arguments. The gallery was packed, press, supporters, protesters holding signs that said everything from "Justice for Lily" to "Free Kevin Price." The Iron Wolves filled an entire row, silent and watchful, making sure everyone knew whose side they were on. Kevin sat at the defense table in a suit that probably cost more than Ethan's bike. His lawyer, Brad Sullivan, was exactly what Margaret had warned: expensive, ruthless, the kind of attorney who could make victims look like liars and abusers look like saints. The prosecution called Sarah first. She walked to the witness stand with her head held high, hands steady, voice clear. She told the jury about the 8 months she'd spent with Kevin, about the first time he'd pushed her, the first time he'd grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave bruises, the way he'd isolated her from friends, controlled her money, told her no one would believe her if she left. Then she told them about the night Lily called Ethan with a broken arm. The courtroom went silent. Sullivan tried to tear her apart on cross-examination, suggesting she'd coached Lily, that she was making false accusations to get money, that she'd actually been the one abusing her daughter. But Sarah held firm, answering every question with quiet dignity that made Sullivan's attacks look desperate and cruel. The prosecution called Lily next. The judge had approved testimony via recorded video to spare her from facing Kevin in person. On the screen, Lily sat in a child-friendly interview room with Margaret beside her. "Can you tell us what happened the night your arm got broken?" Margaret asked gently. Lily looked directly at the camera. "Kevin hit me. I fell down and my arm hurt really bad. So I called Ethan because I knew he would save me." "Why didn't you call your mom?" Kevin said if I told Mommy, he'd hurt her too. But Ethan's scary, so I thought Kevin would be afraid of him. The jury watched this 5-year-old girl describe abuse with the matter-of-fact tone children use when they don't yet understand how wrong the world can be. Several jurors were openly crying. Sullivan objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed the testimony to continue. When it ended, the prosecution rested and Sullivan stood to present his defense. He called character witnesses, Kevin's friends, his father's business associates, people who swore Kevin was a good man who'd never hurt anyone. He called an expert witness who suggested Lily's injuries could have been accidental. He implied Sarah was mentally unstable, that the Iron Wolves had manipulated her, that this was all an elaborate revenge scheme by criminals trying to destroy an innocent man. But then Margaret called her rebuttal witnesses. Jessica Torres took the stand and described 3 years of abuse, the broken ribs, the concussion, the threats that followed her across state lines. Amanda Mitchell testified about the black eye Kevin had given her, about Sheriff Price telling her to drop the charges or lose her son. Lisa Brennan, Rebecca Hall. 4 more women, each with their own story of violence and terror and a legal system that had failed them. By the time the last witness finished, Kevin's defense looked like tissue paper in a hurricane. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. On the charge of felony child abuse, we find the defendant guilty. Kevin's face went white. On the charge of domestic battery, we find the defendant guilty. His father made a choking sound. On the charge of witness intimidation, we find the defendant guilty. The list went on. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 12 charges, 12 guilty verdicts, each one hammering another nail into Kevin Price's coffin. The judge set sentencing for the following week, remanded Kevin to custody without bail, and dismissed the court. As bailiffs led Kevin away in handcuffs, he turned and looked directly at Ethan. His expression promised revenge, promised that this wasn't over, promised that someday, somehow, he would find a way to hurt everyone who'd destroyed him. Ethan stared back without blinking until Kevin disappeared through the door. Outside the courthouse, press surrounded them. Margaret made a statement about justice prevailing and the courage of survivors. Sarah stood beside her holding Lily, both of them crying but smiling through their tears. The Iron Wolves formed a protective circle, keeping the cameras at bay. "What's next?" a reporter shouted at Ethan. He thought about that question, about sentencing hearings and appeals, and the years Kevin would spend behind bars, about Sarah rebuilding her life and Lily growing up without fear, about brotherhood and betrayal, and the thin line between being a monster and being a protector. "We go home," Ethan said. But even as he said it, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. He answered. "Yeah." "You think you won?" The voice was distorted, mechanical, the same one that had called before Kevin ambushed them in the forest. "You think putting Kevin in prison ends this?" Ethan's blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" Kevin was just the beginning, just one piece of something much bigger. The voice paused. "And now that you've destroyed him, the people he worked for are very, very angry." The line went dead. Ethan stood there on the courthouse steps with victory turning to ash in his mouth, watching Lily laugh in her mother's arms, watching his brothers celebrate, knowing that somewhere out there, something worse than Kevin Price was coming for all of them. The phone call haunted Ethan for 3 days. Kevin was just the beginning. He replayed those words while standing guard outside the Wyoming cabin where Sarah and Lily slept. Replayed them while riding back roads with Danny, checking for tails that never appeared. Replayed them in the shower where no one could see his hands shake. Margaret had traced the number to a burner phone purchased with cash in Spokane. Dead end. She'd reviewed Kevin's financial records looking for connections to organized crime or trafficking networks. Found nothing except the kind of debts and dealings you'd expect from a middle management nobody with delusions of power. "Could be a bluff," Margaret said during an encrypted video call. "Someone trying to scare you now that Kevin's locked up." "Didn't sound like a bluff," Ethan said. "Then we treat it as a credible threat until proven otherwise." Margaret's face was grainy on the laptop screen, exhaustion carved into the lines around her eyes. "I've got federal contacts looking into Kevin's associates, his father's business dealings, Sheriff Price's network. If there's something bigger, we'll find it." But a week passed. Then 2. Kevin was sentenced to 18 years in state prison. Sheriff Dale Price got 12 years federal. The county appointed a new sheriff who actually seemed interested in doing the job right. And the mysterious voice on the phone never called back. Life settled into something that almost resembled normal. Sarah and Lily returned to Montana, but not to the house Kevin had destroyed. The Iron Wolves pooled money and rented them a small place on the edge of Kalispell. 2 bedrooms, fenced yard, neighbors close enough to hear if something went wrong. Garrett installed a security system that would have made a paranoid billionaire jealous. Hound's German Shepherd, now named Bear because Lily insisted, lived in the backyard and barked at everything that moved. Sarah got her job back at the diner. Lily started kindergarten with her purple cast finally removed, replaced by a thin white scar that would fade with time. The bruises healed. The nightmares came less frequently. Mother and daughter learned how to breathe without waiting for the next catastrophe. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. He showed up at their house every morning to walk Lily to the school bus, checked the perimeter every night before heading back to the clubhouse, kept his phone on full volume in case Sarah called needing help. The other brothers noticed but didn't comment. They understood hypervigilance, understood how trauma rewired a person's nervous system to scan constantly for threats that might never come. "You can't protect her forever," Danny said one night at the clubhouse. "Watch me." "I'm serious. That kid needs to learn how to live without looking over her shoulder. And she can't do that if you're always there reminding her something bad might happen." Ethan crushed his beer can. Something bad did happen, and it could happen again. Kevin's in prison. His uncle's in prison. The corrupt DA got disbarred. We won, brother. Time to start acting like it. But winning didn't feel like Ethan thought it would. Victory was supposed to bring peace, relief, the sense that justice had balanced the scales. Instead, it just brought exhaustion and the nagging certainty that they'd missed something, that somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. 3 weeks after Kevin's sentencing, the anonymous calls started again. The first one came at 2 a.m. Ethan answered his phone half asleep, expecting Danny or one of the brothers with news about a broken-down bike or a bar fight gone wrong. Instead, that mechanical voice, "Did you really think it was over?" Ethan was instantly awake. Who the hell is this? Someone who's been watching you play hero. Very touching, really. The big bad biker with a soft spot for damaged kids. The voice paused. "But you forgot something important. Kevin didn't work alone. And the people he worked for don't forgive." "Worked for who?" "You'll find out soon enough." The line went dead. Ethan called Margaret immediately. She traced the number, another burner, this time purchased in Missoula. She filed a report with the FBI. They opened an investigation, but investigations took time, and Ethan could feel time running out like sand through clenched fists. The second call came 3 days later, this time to Danny's phone. "Tell Iron that Kevin was useful to us. He had access, connections, a sheriff uncle who didn't ask questions when things needed moving through Montana." The mechanical voice sounded almost amused. "Now Kevin's gone, and we need to recoup our losses. Tell Iron he has a choice. Work with us, or watch everyone he cares about disappear one by one." Danny recorded the call and sent it to Margaret. She brought in federal agents who talked about human trafficking networks and drug pipelines and criminal organizations that used men like Kevin as local facilitators. They showed Ethan photographs of missing women, some dating back years, all last seen in counties where Sheriff Price had jurisdiction. "We think Kevin was part of a trafficking operation," an FBI agent named Torres explained. Her voice was clinical, detached in the way people got when they'd seen too much human suffering. Low level, probably didn't even know who he was working for. But he provided something valuable, a way to move product and people through Montana without law enforcement interference. "Product," Ethan repeated, the word tasting like bile. "You mean women. Women, girls, anyone vulnerable enough to exploit." Torres pulled out more files. "We've been building a case for 2 years. Kevin's arrest gave us leverage to flip some of his associates. They're talking now, giving us names, and every name leads higher up the chain. So you'll arrest them?" "Eventually. But organizations like this don't have headquarters or org charts. They're networks. You cut off one head, 2 more grow back. The only way to stop them is to destroy the entire infrastructure." Torres met Ethan's eyes. Which means we need people on the inside, people they'd trust. Understanding hit Ethan like a freight train. You want me to work with them? We want you to pretend to work with them. Wear a wire, gather evidence, help us identify the higher-ups so we can take down the whole operation. No. Mr. Graves, I said no. Ethan stood, fury rising in his chest. I'm not putting Sarah and Lily at risk, so you can build a case. Find another way. Torres didn't flinch. There is no other way. These people know you now. They've been watching you, studying you, learning your patterns. You're already at risk. The question is whether you want to fight back or wait for them to strike first. Margaret stepped between them. Give us time to think about it. You have 48 hours, Torres said. After that, they'll assume you're not cooperating and they'll escalate. She left. Ethan paced the clubhouse like a caged animal, rage and fear warring in his chest. Danny, Garrett, Hound, they all watched in silence, each of them understanding what Torres was really asking. She wanted Ethan to become bait, to paint a target on his back and hope the feds caught the people pulling the trigger before the bullet found its mark. We could run, Garrett suggested. Take Sarah and Lily, disappear into Canada or Mexico. Running doesn't stop them, Danny said. Just delays the inevitable. So we fight. Hound cracked his knuckles. Find these people ourselves and end them before they end us. And go to prison for murder? Margaret shook her head. That's exactly what they want, for you to act like the criminals they claim you are. Then what? Ethan's voice was raw. We just sit here and wait for them to make a move? We work with the FBI, Margaret said. Let them set the trap. You wear a wire, gather evidence, and the second things go wrong, agents move in and shut it down. You're asking me to trust the same system that let Kevin abuse women for 12 years. I'm asking you to trust that this time is different. Margaret's voice softened. Torres is good. I've worked with her before. She doesn't play games with witnesses' lives. Ethan wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe the system could protect the people he loved. But he'd lived too long in the margins to have faith in institutions that had failed him over and over. That night, he drove to Sarah's house. She answered the door in pajamas, hair tied back, looking more relaxed than he'd seen her in months. Ethan, it's almost midnight. Is everything okay? No. He told her everything, the phone calls, the FBI investigation, the choice Torres had given him. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each detail. So they want you to be bait, she said when he finished. Yeah. And if you say no, they escalate. Come after everyone I care about. Ethan met her eyes, which includes you and Lily. Sarah sank onto the couch, processing this new reality. Upstairs, Lily slept peacefully, completely unaware that the safety they'd fought so hard to build was crumbling again. What do you want to do? Sarah asked. I want to keep you safe. That's not what I asked. Sarah's voice was steady. What do you want? Ethan thought about that. About the man he'd been 6 months ago, a weapon without a purpose, violence without direction, anger without an outlet, and about who he'd become. Someone a little girl called when she needed saving, someone a broken woman trusted to keep his promises, someone who'd learned that strength wasn't just about how hard you could hit, but about what you chose not to destroy. I want to end this, he said. For real this time. So Lily can grow up without being afraid. So you can live without looking over your shoulder. So the next woman Kevin's people target has someone standing between her and them. Sarah reached out and took his hand. Then do it. Work with the FBI. Wear their wire. And when this is over, come back so Lily can finally stop asking when you're going to visit. She asks about me? Every day. Sarah smiled sadly. You're her hero, Ethan. Don't you know that by now? 2 days later, Ethan sat in a federal office building while Agent Torres fitted him with a wire thinner than a guitar string. It transmitted to a receiver in an FBI surveillance van that would stay within a mile radius at all times. The plan was simple. Answer when the anonymous contact called, agree to a meeting, record everything, let the feds swoop in and make arrests. Simple plans never survived contact with reality. The call came that evening. The mechanical voice said, Glad you've come to your senses. Be at the old mining facility outside Libby tomorrow night, 10 p.m. Come alone or the deal's off. Ethan memorized the location. Agent Torres and her team studied satellite images and planned their approach. Danny insisted on riding backup, even though Torres said it was too dangerous. They compromised. Danny and the Iron Wolves would stage at a truck stop 5 miles away, close enough to respond if things went sideways, but far enough to avoid spooking the targets. "You don't have to do this," Danny said as Ethan prepared to leave. "Yeah, I do." "Why? Because some FBI agent asked nicely?" "Because Lily deserves better than growing up in fear." Ethan pulled on his leather vest. "We all do." The ride to Libby took 3 hours through mountains that looked black against the night sky. Ethan's bike cut through darkness, headlight illuminating asphalt and painted lines and nothing else. The wire pressed against his chest like a second heartbeat. In his ear, Agent Torres's voice crackled through a hidden earpiece. "We're in position. Remember, your job is just to talk. Get them to incriminate themselves. We handle everything else." The mining facility was exactly what Ethan expected. Abandoned buildings, rusted equipment, the bones of industry left to rot. A single black SUV waited in the center of the main yard, headlights off. Ethan killed his engine and climbed off the bike slowly, hands visible, making it clear he wasn't armed. A man stepped out of the SUV, late 50s, expensive suit under a leather jacket, face like granite. Behind him, 2 more men emerged, younger, harder, the kind of muscle you hired when you expected violence. "You're iron," the man said. Not a question. "Yeah. I'm Mr. Voss. We need to talk about your future." Voss smiled, all teeth and zero warmth. "Kevin Price was useful to us. Provided services, made connections, and then you destroyed him. He broke a kid's arm. He was careless." Voss's smile vanished. "But useful men can be replaced. The question is whether you're smart enough to replace him." "What kind of services are we talking about?" "The kind where you don't ask questions and we pay you very well." Voss pulled out a phone, showed Ethan a banking app with a number that had too many zeros. $20,000 a month. All you do is let us know when law enforcement is sniffing around. Provide safe houses when we need to move product through Montana. Look the other way." In Ethan's ear, Agent Torres, "Keep him talking. We need details." "What kind of product?" Ethan asked. Voss's eyes narrowed. "Does it matter?" "Yeah, it does. Let's just say we facilitate connections between people who want something and people who can provide it." Voss's voice turned cold. "You don't need to know more than that. You just need to decide if you're with us or against us. And if I'm against you, then we make sure everyone you care about suffers before you die." Voss nodded to his men. "We know where Sarah lives, where Lily goes to school. We know the route Danny takes home from the clubhouse every night. We know which hospitals treat your brothers when they get hurt." Rage boiled in Ethan's chest. "You threatening a 5-year-old? I'm stating facts." Voss stepped closer. "You cost us a valuable asset. Kevin wasn't just moving product. He was providing us with people, girls who wouldn't be missed, women no one cared about. And now he's in prison, which means we need to rebuild our network. You're going to help us do that." In his ear, Torres, "We've got enough. Stand down. We're moving in." But Ethan wasn't done. "What happened to the women Kevin gave you?" "Does it matter? They served a purpose, made us money, disappeared when they stopped being useful." Voss's smile returned. "Just like you will, if you don't agree to our terms right now." Headlights exploded across the mining yard, FBI vehicles pouring in from every direction, agents shouting commands, weapons drawn. Voss's men reached for guns but were swarmed before they could fire a shot. Voss himself stood frozen, watching his empire collapse in real time. Agent Torres appeared, cuffing Voss while reading him his rights. "Mr. Voss, you're under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and about 15 other charges I'll remember later." Voss looked at Ethan with pure hatred. "You're dead. You and everyone you love. I have people everywhere, lawyers, judges, men who'll—" "Save it for your trial," Torres said, shoving him toward a vehicle. The arrests were surgical. Voss's men were separated, questioned, offered deals to flip on their boss. Within hours, agents had names, locations, financial records, everything they needed to dismantle a trafficking network that had operated for over a decade. Ethan stood in the middle of the chaos watching handcuffed men being loaded into federal vehicles. He should have felt victorious, should have felt relief that they'd caught the people behind Kevin's protection. But all he felt was exhausted and hollow, and aware that this was just one network in one state, that there were dozens more operating in the shadows, that the fight never really ended. Danny appeared beside him. "You good?" "Define good." "Still breathing, not arrested, not dead." "Then yeah, I'm good." They rode back to Kalispell together, engines rumbling through the Montana night, brothers returning from another war they'd somehow survived. Behind them, federal agents processed evidence that would send Voss and his organization to prison for life. Ahead of them, the clubhouse waited with lights on and coffee brewing and men who understood violence but chose when to use it. The next morning, Ethan drove to Sarah's house. She answered the door, still in her robe, coffee cup in hand, looking like she'd been awake for hours waiting for news. "It's over," Ethan said. "For real this time." Sarah's knees buckled. Ethan caught her, held her while she cried tears of relief and exhaustion and everything she'd been holding in for months. Upstairs, Lily called down. "Mommy, is that Ethan?" "Yeah, baby." "Can he stay for breakfast?" Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Can you?" Ethan thought about the clubhouse where his brothers waited, about the open road calling him toward some other fight in some other town, about the life he'd lived before a 5-year-old girl called him in the middle of the night. "Yeah," he said. "I can stay." Breakfast was chaos in the best way, Lily chattering about kindergarten and her teacher and the new friend she'd made whose name was Sophie. Sarah burning toast and laughing about it. Ethan sitting at a kitchen table that didn't belong to him but somehow felt like home anyway. After Lily left for school, Sarah poured more coffee and said, "What happens now?" "Voss goes to trial. His network gets dismantled. The women he trafficked get found and brought home." Ethan stared into his cup. "And you and Lily get to live without being afraid. What about you? What about me? Do you get to live without being afraid?" Sarah's voice was gentle. "Or are you always going to be looking for the next fight?" The question cut deeper than Ethan expected. He thought about his father's voice telling him violence was the only thing he was good for. About the years he'd spent proving that voice right. About a little girl who'd looked at him and seen something worth saving. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm trying to figure it out." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You'll get there. I believe in you." The words settled into Ethan's chest like a seed planted in rocky soil. Not blooming yet, maybe not ever, but there, present, possible. Agent Torres called that afternoon with an update. Voss was cooperating, giving names, locations, financial records in exchange for a reduced sentence. The network he'd run spanned 4 states and had trafficked over 60 women in the past decade. 23 had been recovered alive. The rest were still missing, presumed dead. "We're going to find them," Torres promised, "every single one, and we're going to make sure no one else disappears into that system." "What about Kevin?" Ethan asked. He was part of this. Kevin provided local logistics, access to vulnerable women through his relationships. Sheriff Price looked the other way when girls went missing from his county. Torres paused. "Kevin's being charged as an accessory to trafficking. Could add another 20 years to his sentence." Good, Ethan thought. Let him rot in a cell knowing he'd destroyed more lives than anyone had realized. Let him spend decades understanding the depth of his own monstrousness. The trial happened 3 months later. Ethan testified about the meeting at the mining facility, about Voss's confession, about the threats made against Sarah and Lily. The defense tried to paint him as an unreliable witness, a criminal, a biker, someone with every reason to lie. But the jury heard the recordings, heard Voss bragging about moving product, about making women disappear, about having people everywhere who would ensure his organization survived. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Guilty on all charges. Life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Kevin Price was tried separately. More women testified, including 3 who'd been trafficked through his connections with Voss's network. Women who'd trusted Kevin, who'd dated him or known him or crossed his path and ended up disappearing for months before escaping or being rescued. The jury took 6 hours. Guilty. Another 40 years added to his sentence. When it was finally over, when every trial ended and every guilty verdict was read and every predator was locked away, Ethan stood outside the courthouse and realized he had no idea what came next. For months, his entire existence had been about protecting Lily, about stopping Kevin, about dismantling the network that had enabled so much suffering. Now it was done, and he felt untethered, floating, a weapon without a target. Danny found him smoking behind the courthouse. "You coming back to the clubhouse?" "Eventually." "But not right now." "No." Ethan crushed his cigarette. "I need to figure some things out first." "Like what?" "Like who I am when I'm not fighting." Ethan met Danny's eyes. "I've been angry my whole life, used violence as the answer to every problem, but Lily taught me something, that sometimes the brave thing is choosing not to hit back." Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your dad was wrong about you." "I know." "Do you?" Danny stepped closer. "Because I'm not sure you do. You still carry his voice around like it's gospel. Still think you're one bad day away from becoming him. But that kid in there?" He pointed toward the courthouse. "She knows the truth. You're not your father. You're the man who answered when she called. And that's who you've always been." The words hit Ethan somewhere deep. He wanted to believe them, wanted to believe he was more than accumulated rage and trauma dressed in leather. But belief required faith, and faith was something he'd lost a long time ago. "I'm trying," he said finally. "I know." Danny clapped him on the shoulder. "That's all anyone can do." That evening, Ethan drove to Sarah's house one last time. She was packing boxes, moving to Oregon where she had family, where Lily could start fresh, without everyone knowing her as the girl whose mother's boyfriend went to prison. "You're leaving," Ethan said. "We need a new start. Somewhere Kevin's name doesn't follow us." Sarah taped up a box. "But we'll visit, and you're welcome to visit us." Lily appeared from her room holding her stuffed bear. "You're not leaving too, are you?" Ethan knelt down to her level. "I'm staying in Montana, but I'll come see you in Oregon. Promise." "You're good at keeping promises," Lily said solemnly. "I try." She threw her arms around his neck, squeezing tight. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved yourself," Ethan said. "You were brave enough to ask for help. That's the hardest part." Lily pulled back and looked at him with those huge gray eyes. "Are you going to be okay?" The question caught him off guard. A 5-year-old asking if he was going to be okay, as if she could see the cracks in his armor better than anyone. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." 2 weeks later, Sarah and Lily moved to Oregon. The Iron Wolves threw them a going-away party, bikers in leather vests playing with a kindergartner, men who looked like they ate nails for breakfast wearing paper crowns because Lily asked them to. It was absurd and beautiful and exactly what family was supposed to be. When they finally left, Ethan stood in the driveway watching their car disappear down the road. Danny came up beside him. "You did good," Danny said. "We all did." "Yeah, but you started it. You answered the phone." Ethan thought about that night 6 months ago, drunk in a bar, angry at the world, ready to let someone else's suffering pass him by. And then a little girl's voice. "He broke my arm." 4 words that had changed everything. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. The clubhouse became less of a fortress and more of a home. The Iron Wolves took on a new mission, helping other women like Sarah, other kids like Lily, using their reputation to protect people who had nowhere else to turn. They partnered with Margaret Hayes, with Agent Torres, with social workers and advocates, and anyone trying to help the vulnerable survive in a world designed to exploit them. It wasn't legal, wasn't sanctioned, but it mattered. Ethan started going to therapy, not because he wanted to, but because Danny made it a condition of staying in the club. The therapist was a woman in her 60s who'd worked with combat veterans and understood trauma in a way most people didn't. "You're not your father," she told him during their 5th session. "Everyone keeps saying that, because it's true. But you don't believe it yet. How do I start believing it?" She thought about that for a moment. By forgiving yourself for the times you acted like him, by understanding that who you were doesn't have to define who you become, by accepting that change is possible even when it feels impossible. It took months, slow, painful work examining every violent impulse, every moment of rage, every time he'd chosen fists over words. But gradually, something shifted. The anger didn't disappear. It probably never would. but it became something he controlled instead of something that controlled him. A year after Kevin's conviction, Ethan rode to Oregon to visit Sarah and Lily. They'd settled into a small house near Portland, close to Sarah's sister and her family. Lily had grown 3 inches and lost her 2 front teeth. She ran toward Ethan when he pulled up on his bike, laughing and shouting his name. "You came! You really came!" "I promised, didn't I?" They spent the weekend exploring Portland. Vegan food carts that Lily thought were weird, Powell's bookstore where she picked out 6 books, a park where she tried to teach Ethan how to play hopscotch. Sarah watched with quiet contentment, finally looking like a woman who wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. On the last night, after Lily went to bed, Sarah and Ethan sat on the porch drinking coffee and watching fireflies drift through the darkness. "She still talks about you," Sarah said. "Tells everyone at school about the biker who saved her." "I didn't save her, just showed up." "That's the same thing to a kid." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I used to think I was a good judge of character, but I let Kevin into our lives, let him hurt Lily, let him manipulate me into thinking I was the problem." "You're not responsible for what he did." "I know, but it took me a long time to believe that." She looked at Ethan. "You helped me believe it. You and Danny and all the others. You showed me what real men look like, not the kind who hurt people to feel powerful, but the kind who protect people because it's the right thing to do." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He'd spent his whole life being told he was dangerous, destructive, barely controlled violence waiting to explode. The idea that someone saw him as protective, as safe, felt foreign and uncomfortable and achingly necessary. "Thank you," he said finally. Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand. "No, thank you." The ride back to Montana took 2 days. Ethan took his time, riding through mountains and forests and small towns where no one knew his name. He stopped at diners for coffee and pie, talked to strangers about nothing important, watched the world exist without requiring anything from him except presence. When he finally pulled into the clubhouse, Danny was waiting on the porch. "How was Oregon?" "Good. Lily's doing great. Sarah, too." "And you?" Ethan thought about that question, about a year of therapy and hard conversations and learning to exist without anger as his primary emotion, about a little girl who still believed he was a hero despite knowing all the ways he wasn't. "I'm getting there," he said. Danny smiled. "That's all any of us can do." Inside, the clubhouse smelled like coffee and motor oil and home. The other brothers greeted Ethan with nods and handshakes and the kind of quiet acceptance that came from surviving wars together. They didn't need to say much. The presence was enough. That night, Ethan stood outside under Montana stars that looked exactly like they had a year ago, but somehow felt different. The world was still cruel, still full of predators and victims and systems designed to protect power instead of people. But there were also men like Danny who built brotherhoods from broken pieces, women like Margaret who fought battles in courtrooms, little girls like Lily who were brave enough to ask for help. And there was Ethan, no longer just violence waiting to happen, but a man learning to be something more. A protector, a brother, someone who answered when people called. His phone buzzed, text from Lily. "I miss you already. Come back soon, okay?" He smiled and typed back, "I promise." And this time, the promise felt like something he could keep. Weeks turned to months. The Iron Wolves took on more cases. Women escaping abusive relationships, kids caught in custody battles with dangerous parents, people who fell through the cracks of systems that were supposed to protect them. They didn't save everyone. Couldn't save everyone. But they showed up, and sometimes showing up was enough. Margaret's legal practice expanded. She hired 2 associates and took on more pro bono work, building a reputation as the lawyer who didn't back down from powerful men. Agent Torres was promoted to a task force targeting human trafficking across the Northwest. Sheriff Price's replacement was actually competent, actually cared about justice instead of protecting his friends. Things got better. Not perfect, not fixed, but better. Ethan celebrated his 40th birthday at the clubhouse, surrounded by brothers, survivors, and people who'd become family through shared trauma. Sarah and Lily drove up from Oregon for the party. Lily had made him a card covered in glitter and drawings of motorcycles. Inside, she'd written, "To Ethan, the bravest person I know. Love, Lily." He put it on the wall beside the club patches and old photographs, a reminder that courage wasn't just about how hard you fought, but about who you fought for. That night, after everyone left and the clubhouse was quiet, Ethan sat alone thinking about his father, about the man who'd raised him to believe violence was strength and gentleness was weakness, about the voice that had lived in his head for 40 years telling him he was irredeemable. "You were wrong," Ethan said to the empty room, "about all of it." The words felt like an exorcism, like finally cutting a rope that had been pulling him toward darkness his entire life. He didn't know what came next, didn't know if he'd ever fully heal from the damage his father had done, but he knew he was trying, and trying mattered more than succeeding. His phone buzzed. "Danny, come outside." Ethan stepped onto the porch and found his brothers gathered in the parking lot, bikes idling, exhaust smoke drifting through the night air. They didn't say anything, just revved their engines in unison, the sound rolling across the Montana darkness like thunder. It was a ritual they'd done 100 times, a reminder that they were pack, family, brothers who'd chosen each other when the world said they didn't deserve choosing. Ethan climbed on his bike and joined them, falling into formation as they rode out onto empty highways. The wind tore at his face. The engine vibrated through his bones. The road stretched endlessly ahead, illuminated by headlights cutting through darkness. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Graves felt something other than rage. He felt free. Years later, Lily would tell people about the night a biker answered her phone call, about how he rode through a blizzard to save her, about how he kept his promises even when the world fell apart, about how he taught her that heroes weren't people who never got scared. They were people who got scared and showed up anyway. She'd tell them about the iron wolves who stood guard while she slept, about the lawyer who fought battles in courtrooms, about her mother who found the courage to leave, about the federal agent who brought down a trafficking network, about all the broken people who chose to become something better. And she'd tell them that sometimes the most dangerous men are the ones who choose not to be dangerous, the ones who hold violence in their fists and decide there are better ways to protect what they love. That's what Ethan taught her. That's what she'd carry forward. And somewhere in Montana, on empty highways beneath endless stars, an outlaw biker named Iron rode through the darkness, knowing that a little girl believed he was a hero. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. In the end, strength wasn't about the violence Ethan was capable of. It was about the violence he chose to hold back. Kevin rotted in prison. The trafficking network was destroyed. Sarah and Lily built new lives, and the iron wolves kept riding, protecting the vulnerable, answering calls in the night, proving that brotherhood was stronger than blood, and that even damaged men could become heroes if someone believed in them enough. One phone call, one broken arm, one promise kept. That's how the story of Iron and the girl who saved him began. And it's how they both learned to be free.